Hello and welcome to Weekly Suit Batman. Wait, no. This is the Weekly Stuff podcast.
Yes, it is.
With Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff, but the stuff this week is Batman. So,
yes, it is.
There you go. We are continuing our Batman on Film series this week with Part 4, the fourth theatrical Batman animated feature, first animated feature, and only one released theatrically, Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Yes.
Which is, if not the best Batman movie, at the very fucking least one of them.
And I'll just say it's the best Batman movie. I mean, we still have to watch some of them and reevaluate it. And who knows? I haven't seen Batman Forever since I was like 8, so maybe that is secretly the best Batman movie.
It's not.
Okay, so I will say, I will having, remembering enough about how I feel about the Christopher Nolan movies, like, I know for sure that none of them are better than Mask of the Phantasm. So I'll say that we're about to talk about the best Batman movie on this podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that.
And I will say, we'll get into the talk later. We have a little bit of stuff, but just my initial reaction. I have obviously seen this movie many times over the years. The last time I watched it was when the Blu-ray came out. This was before they did the whole animated series on Blu-ray, and it was really impressive, but for whatever reason, it didn't hit me as hard. And so I'd been kind of unsure what my feelings on it were, and then watching it again last night on the Blu-ray. I've been watching stuff on, my brother has a 55-inch OLED TV, which is the thing I am now most jealous of in the entire world, because it looks better than any movie theater at this point. And we were like in the dark, big OLED TV, and I felt like I was in a theater watching this movie, and I think that was part of like what hit me about it. This is a superior superhero film, one of the best. One of the only like significant theatrical animated superhero movies. Yeah. We need more of those, obviously. Given this and Into the Spider-Verse are two of just the best ones.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, this comes from the best overall Batman thing, which is Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, it is like one of the culminating achievements of that team and their work.
Yeah.
And it's just like an A+ incredible, great movie.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about it. So that'll be our topic today. What have you been up to, Sean? In the last week,
I've continued to be playing Genshin Impact because
me too.
Because you can never walk away from that game. But I have been balancing doing a little bit of Genshin Impact I have finally started playing Yakuza 6, which I think it's technically called Yakuza 6: The Song of Life,
which is a great title.
Yes, they decided to put a subtitle on this one, which it is that subtitle in Japanese. And they're like, let's bring the subtitle over to English for once. And it's great. I'm not super far into it. I'm maybe like 6 hours or something. So I've kind of gone a little bit into the Hiroshima area. And I don't know how much of the game is set there, but I'm kind of like in the beginning of that section of the game. I've seen one scene so far with Beat Takeshi, who he plays
I forgot he was in this.
Yeah, he plays the head of a very small Yakuza family that is in this small town in the Hiroshima area that Kiryu goes to as part of the plot of the game. And I've had one scene with him, and it's very good. He's not playing like a Yakuza character in one of his own movies. He's more like, it's kind of playing on more the comedic side of him.
Right.
So it's more this kind of like lighthearted, fun character. But
which we should say is what Japanese people would be more familiar with.
Yes, yeah. He's first and foremost a comedian in Japan.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're playing on that side, although I suspect that there's probably something more to the character.
Yeah. Do you think they actually got Takeshi Kitano to wear like the mocap stuff?
No, well, they don't mocap.
Okay, they don't.
Yakuza
okay.
games, no.
But he looks like him, right?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay.
It is 100% him. It's based on his likeness. I mean, they definitely do like photo scans and all that kind of stuff. But
he seems like the last person on Earth who would ever wear the dots.
Yes.
But okay, they don't mocap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they like, that's like one of those things with Yakuza. I think most people probably assume they do mocap for those scenes because of how good the acting is in them.
I played a little bit of Yakuza 7 when I got it to test it out. I'm going to wait until the PS5 version to play the whole thing, but I was assuming that just because I'm like, Jesus, this is, it's obviously a cheaper looking game than a lot of like big Western titles because it's just made on a smaller budget.
Yeah.
But like, no, the facial animations are so good. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like hand animated referencing their performances that they get in the vocal booth. So it's a great game. One thing that I love about it is the broad premise of the game is Kiryu after the end of Yakuza 5, he goes to jail for about 3 years to kind of like wipe his name clean and sort of like finally like divest himself of all the bullshit that has been going on in his life since he was a Yakuza person and like joined the Yakuza and all that. And so he comes out of prison 3 years later, and he goes back to Okinawa to the orphanage that he had started running in Yakuza 3, and finds out that Haruka, his adoptive daughter, is missing. He doesn't know where she's gone. And then when he goes to Kamurocho to try to find her, he discovers that she has been in an accident and is comatose, and that she has a 1-year-old son that nobody has any idea that she had. And so he discovers this all of a sudden, and so he tries to track down what happened to Haruka in those 3 years, who is the father of this kid, while also trying to take care of the kid, which means that we've had this thing of the dad game, right? Which was a phenomenon that started in around 2013 with Bioshock Infinite and Last of Us. It has continued to go on with God of War and all that. It's been a topic of interest in video game criticism as old video game developers start becoming dads. They put dads in their video games and it creates the dad game. But Yakuza started doing the dad game in 2005 because it originally was about Kiryu raising an adoptive daughter. And so Yakuza is so far ahead of the game that when everything else is doing dad games, Yakuza is already at the granddad game. Because that's what this is. Your granddad Kiryu trying to figure out what happened to Haruka while you're taking care of this baby. There's a very funny, protracted mission around the time you get to Hiroshima where you think that that's where the father might be at. And you're trying to get milk for the baby. And all the stores are closed because it's a little shitty town in the middle of nowhere, and they don't. All the stores close at 8:00 at night, and so you're carrying this baby around, trying going to every store, knocking on the windows, being please, I just need this baby won't stop crying. And you occasionally have to stop and play a little mini game that I think Death Stranding basically ripped off from this game, where you use the controller 6-axis to shake the baby and rock it back and forth to make it calm down. What I'm saying here is that Yakuza is very, very good.
Yes.
And yeah, it is. I'm very happy that they decided with Yakuza 6 to give Kiryu a full game just to himself as the only playable character, kind of send him off.
Because how many games have they been doing the multi-character thing?
4, 5, and if you put 0 in there,
okay.
0 also, it's Kiryu and Majima. And then 4 and 5 in particular, Kiryu, while he is he definitely gets the juiciest stuff in the endings of those games, for the bulk of those games, he's not the most important character. Because there's not as much stuff to do with him. And so I like that with this one, they're okay, we did our multi-protagonist thing, and it's clear that they were running out of things to do with Kiryu in the story, but the last story with him is always that's the one story left to tell, is how does he fully get out of this life? What is this conclusion for him? And it is very fun getting just a proper Kiryu game again, and just running out with this baby in Hiroshima and fucking up small town Yakuza dudes and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. I am definitely excited later this year when we get to talk about Yakuza 7.
Yeah.
And that'll be a fun. You've played all of them. It'll be my first one. Eventually I'll go back and do all the other ones, but right now I'm too busy playing Genshin Impact.
How's that going for you, Jonathan?
It's very good. Last night I drew Diluc. I fucking got him. It was my first 5-star character. It's so funny. Last time on this show, we were talking about, you were everyone wanted Diluc. Everyone, and I don't, and you were I don't have him, and I'm always a little jealous. And then last night, and I had a couple of bad draws in a row where I had very disappointing where I always do the 10 pull thing.
Yeah, which you should always do.
Right. And I had one where I didn't get a character at all, just a weapon, and it was shitty. And I had another one where I had 2 in a row where I got Bennett again, who I already had. And so finally I got Diluc last night, and then this morning I got another 10 draw because I had enough Acquaint Fates and Primo Gems that I drew, and I'm blanking on the name, Jingqi, I think, the
water sword dude?
Yeah, who's into his books. And I had just done the first quest with him last night, because now I'm getting into the Liyue stuff because I finished all the Storm...
Terror?
Yeah. No, not Storm Terror, the... Dragon Spire, sorry.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I finished all the Dragon Spire stuff, which I know, you would have played after Liyue, but it was, there on the map. And
it is technically, connected to all the Mondstadt stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so I had played around in Liyue a little bit, but now I'm, doing the story stuff there. And I'd met him and started doing the quest with the books, and he's a very funny character. And I had gotten to borrow him once in a quest, and I'm oh, this is cool, because I only had one other water character, which was Barbara, who I haven't found to be very effective. So now I have this guy, and I'm this is awesome. So I have him and Diluc, and I'm trying to level them up enough that I can, kind of build a new party around them. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I have to say, I have gotten extremely lucky in the gacha in the past month, because I played that game from, when it launched in, September through to maybe like the very end of November or like early December, with the only 5-star character I had was Nana, who I got I think I got her on like my second pull. I got her so early that I assumed that you were supposed to get a 5-star character guaranteed, and I just got very lucky like so early in the game. I was like, because that's something that's very common. A lot of gacha games was just like, oh, everyone will have at least one super ultimate rare, whatever rarity is, character. I just got very lucky and got her super, super early. Then went like the whole game getting mostly just Xiangling and a bunch of different pulls, to the point I talked about on the end of your podcast, where I have her maxed out in that constellation because I have her maxed out in the constellation, and I got her one more time on top of that, which just gives you a bunch of currency because at that point they're like, you've leveled up her skill tree all the way. Like I don't know how you keep on getting this character in dupes. And then in early December I got Tartaglia, which I got him through. There's what's called a pity system in the game, where if you go, you're basically guaranteed to get a 5-star character eventually. Yeah. Like if you do a certain number of pulls, eventually you'll get a 5-star character. And I'm almost positive that Tartaglia must be that for me, because it sort of seemed to sync up with when I looked up online about how many pulls that would be. So I got him. I'm like, awesome, 2 5-star characters. Tartaglia is great. And then ever since, in my head, this is how it's worked. Ever since I set Genshin Impact as my number 1 game of the year, I've gotten so many good fucking gacha pulls, where I've got since then Kei-Ching, who is a lightning sword cat lady, who's a 5-star. I got in one pull, I got both Albedo, who is the Dragonspire character, and Mona, who is the water. She's like a water mage lady.
Fuck.
And then 2 days ago, I was looking at the new banner that has Ganyu, who's another Liyue character they just added, and the other characters promoted in the banner, or the other 4-star characters that you're most likely to get. One of them is that water sword dude. I have all of them already, and I was like, I don't really. One of them Xiangling, and I'm like, I don't want to pull this and get another fucking Xiangling, so I don't want to risk it, because you're more likely to get her because she's promoted in the banner. I was like, I'll do at least one pull and see what I get, but I'm not going to I had 3 pulls saved up. I was like, I'm not going to put a bunch in this, because it's I don't want to just get these 4-star characters I'm not going to use. And I did the one pull and I got Ganyu. So
what the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know. It is unbelievably lucky. I'm sure I'm going to go a year without getting another 5-star character in the game.
That's fine. You have plenty to do now.
I've got more than enough. I don't have anywhere near enough materials to level up any of them. So it's I've got all these 5-star characters. I'm like, well, eventually there'll be a bunch of big events and new story stuff, and I'll get a bunch of stuff and I'll level you up, figure out how you guys work. But right now, I just like looking at you and hearing your voices when I want to hear the voice lines. It's
very funny because I have enough characters now that I'm now feeling the squeeze on leveling and stuff. Because I'm also getting to, I have I think 4 or 5 characters. I have 5 characters leveled up to level 50, and I'm waiting to hit adventure rank 30 before I can go beyond that. I'm almost at that. And then now I have Diluc and Jinqui, however you say it, that I also want to level up that far. But now I'm starting to realize, I can't just keep everyone leveled crazy high.
No, yeah. So, at a certain point, where I'm at, I have my main 4 that I keep leveled up, and I have 1 extra character who's a Geo character that I use occasionally when the situation needs it, and I have her more or less leveled up around where they are. And other than that, I'm going to wait until I get my characters maxed out, and then I will start investing in some of the other characters. Because when you get, especially once you get, I'm where I'm at, my main 4 are all level 80. And so it's once you're there, those resources become pretty tight. Although once I think I get to the next adventure, or the next world level, every time you go up that world level, it becomes more generous in giving you those kinds of materials.
That's cool.
So once I get that, I think that will help me then start leveling up some of those other characters.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
Yeah,
because I'm also I'm obviously not at a point where I have a completely set crew, because I've played a shit ton of it, but it's only been 2 or 3 weeks for me. So I'm still experimenting and trying to figure it out. I've still had my player created character in there most of the time. And it's kind of funny. I think she's the Anemo stuff she has I love, and I would love to get Anemo is
that's wind,
right? That's right. Yeah, I love her Anemo powers. I wish I could get another character who had Anemo, and there's a couple I've had my eye on, but I haven't drawn them yet. Because for some of the puzzles in Liyue, you have to switch her to Geo, which is not nearly as useful in fights for her. But it's fine. But yeah, I have so many characters I want to kind of experiment with. The one definite 100% lock on my team always is Beidou, because she is phenomenally powerful. Like at this point, because I have her with a really good 4-star sword I built, and I have her all the way leveled for what I can do right now. And her move where you hold down R2 and she like blocks, but then takes in damage and then puts it back out. I can just kill whole teams of Hilichurls that way. Yeah. And it's awesome.
And then eventually, once you start ascending the characters past a certain point, there's like 2 additional talents they unlock that are like passive abilities that modify the way the character works. In beta, one of the ones she gets, and I think it's going to be the first one you get. I don't remember what level it's at though. But she gets one where if you trigger your R2 attack right when you take damage, instead of having to block and like charge it up, it just does the full power thing immediately. So it's like it turns from a block into a counter into just a raw counter if you time it well. And that is where she becomes like a really, really, really powerful character against particularly like she's a really, really good character against the boss enemies because she just tanks a shit ton of damage, and her full-powered R2 attack, which you can do pretty reliably on big boss enemies that you know what their pattern is, like that is by far the most damaging R2 attack in the whole game because it has to be used in specific situations for it to do full damage. So yeah, she's very, very good.
She's so good. I did get Zhongling, your girl, and she's awesome. She is not my most useful so far fire character, so I haven't used her a ton. But while I was going through Liyue and doing some stuff, I just had her in there because I wasn't doing a lot of combat, and I don't have her max leveled, although I do. She's my only spear user I've unlocked. And so I have 3 different legendary spears, including the one you make on Dragonspire that took me for fucking ever. And I didn't realize it was a spear until I finished it, and then I was like, I don't have anyone. And then I unlocked Zhongling and got it. And so she's been using that, even though it's more useful for cryo characters. Fuck it. But she's really cool. I love her character design is one of my favorites in the game. She's so cool looking. I love just wandering the world with her. So yeah, I mean, part of the fun for me is just experimenting with the team lineups and just wandering around the world with them all. And I'm at a point where I probably will be able to like let my player creator character recede a little bit, just so I can like play with other characters. Although I have grown quite the attachment.
Yeah, that was when I got Tartaglia. That was when I was like, okay, it's finally time to let go of my player character. I have my 4 like unique characters, because there's always something where it's like I want my player character in some of like when I did like the really big story stuff, I would put them in the party because I'm like, that feels right. Yeah. But I'm wandering around the world and like, that feels kind of lame to be using my player character. I don't know. It's like when your like mom drops you off at the mall or whatever, you don't want everyone else to see her. It's like, I want all my cool characters in my party. That's like, man, I got very lucky and I got Tartaglia. And not everybody else is going to have this character. So I want like the characters that are unique to me.
Here's the funniest story about how I got Diluc, though. I was getting pretty close in Primo Gems that I was going to be able to do another 10 pull. But I wasn't quite there, and it was going to take another day or two. So I was like, okay. And then I was looking around the menus, and I realized, wait. All these characters that I've ascended have rewards and give you these faces. And I'm like, and I didn't, it never tells you that. So I never realized
that's something that was not actually in the game at launch. They eventually added in as like, I think, an incentive to level up all of your characters more because you get like rewards back for it.
If you ascend each of them once, you get the blue. It's not the Acquaint face, the other one.
It's like the default standard. Gotcha.
You get one of those, and I got 10 just through that because at least because getting them to level 20 and then ascended is very easy. And so I just pulled all of those and then did a draw and got Diluc. I fell on top of the fucking world because I'm like, this cost me nothing, and I got Diluc. That was awesome.
You got one of the best characters.
Oh man, that game, I've spent $11 on it so far, and I have gotten much more value than, just call it a random game, The Avengers. I paid $60 for that. That game, no one's playing that anymore. Holy shit. Anyway, Genshin Impact is good. Y'all never thought we were going to talk about the free-to-play game this much, but there you go. It's good stuff.
Very good.
So we will talk about that more at some point in the future. In terms of the news, I don't have an outline. But I'm sure we both read this. Last night, so we're recording this Sunday, Saturday night, Jason Schreier dropped his Cyberpunk 20... I guess it was Friday night. Dropped his Cyberpunk 2077 story that we all knew was coming eventually. And I wanted to discuss it briefly because the saga of Cyberpunk is very fascinating. It's not a super surprising story in terms of having like big revelations of like, oh my god. But it puts a lot of stuff in context of like, okay, of course. Like, it wasn't actually in development until 2016. This whole thing about this is since 2012 is bullshit. It seems like it had a pretty troubled development. It seems like they had no real sense of resource management. The E3 demo in 2018 was fake. Like, you know, all the hits.
Yeah, it was that. If you've read Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, his book, that goes over a bunch of those stories of development in different games. It is like, you just see, it's like, man, it's like the same thing happening over and over and over again at these huge studios. And it is definitely that. I think the one that felt like the most interesting to me is the attitude. And Jason Schreier commented on, I don't remember if that was in the story on Twitter, but he basically himself drew the comparison to Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem, where it's like, because the studio released this like heavily acclaimed like Game of the Year game, Witcher 3 for CD, the Mass Effect series, and Dragon Age for BioWare, that like, this is like what we are. We're the Witcher 3 studio. Like, look at like all the claim we have, and then use that as an excuse to say it's like, oh, we'll figure it out because look at how good we are. And it's like this sort of like hubris by the studio management, and just saying like, well, we shipped this great game that's making all this money and everybody loves, and so that means that we can do no wrong. And it's like, well, no, like you can very easily do wrong if the studio management is not like on top of their shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just seeing that tragedy and like thinking about how a lot of like very dumb choices by a small handful of people at the top of the studio, like the ripple effect that had on all the people actually working in the game and putting in all those hours, knowing that everything is good that's going on is completely fucked, but having no power to change it. That resonated with me right now for very specific reasons. It's like, man, everyone at the top of the food chain is making clearly, obviously stupid choices, and then everybody at the bottom of the food chain suffers about it and can't do anything to change it.
Yeah, I mean, there's the part where like it gets to, they announced their release date as like April 2020 was the initial release date, I think, and like all the developers being like, we're not hitting that.
Yeah, they're like, that's a joke, right? Because what it was like 2022 was what one of the developers said, that was like, that's what they thought probably the game would actually be able to come out.
Yeah, which that was the jaw drop for me of like 2022. Like when you think about it, like, yeah, that actually makes sense because the game is, I think lost in the discussion is that it's also just unfinished as a game. Like it is not it's just not a fully put together thing. Like I played probably 5 or 6 hours of it. My brother actually, because he has an RTX 3080 now, he has like the very rare graphics card that can play this fucking game, has beaten it, and he said it was not very good. He told me some stuff about it, and that like there's some interesting stuff here and there, but like it is just so clearly like not baked. And yeah, it's such a bummer. It's because, you know, the thing about the BioWare comparison though is that it wasn't their second big game that they got to this on.
Right.
It took a while to grow that ego to that point, and some like interference from EA and shit. You know, this is like just such a weird self-inflicted wound, because he also, I think, gave a good sense in this story of like the scope of the project, of that, you know, it's a bigger game. I don't know if it's bigger in terms of landmass than Witcher 3, but technically it's a bigger challenge, what they were trying to pull off. They were building a new engine as they were making the game. So that alone is a mess, as we know from all sorts of development stories.
Yeah.
And all of this they were doing with a bigger crew than they had for Witcher 3, but not a big crew in comparison to something like GTA 5, which is what you would really need to like do what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And they were trying to do it in the same amount of time they did Witcher 3. And it's just like, it's insanity. It's insanity at a certain point.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, all the bullshit about because when Jason Schreier published his story on Friday, like the day before is when the director of the game came out with that video Q&A, kind of trying to get ahead of it. And I have never called bullshit so audibly on something as them saying, we tested it on the consoles and we didn't find any problems. But then people, it's like, fuck off with that. And then, of course, in the story, it's like, no, we found all those problems, just no one was listening.
It's like, yeah, we didn't realize, that we tested it on the Super PS4. That was never released to the public. It's just like, it just makes all the games run perfect. It's weird.
Yeah.
We should have probably thought that people don't have the Super PS4. They just have the PS4.
Oh, Mike, I mean, it's so nuts. It's so nuts. And I really do wonder if the game can or will be fixed on consoles.
Yeah, because I mean, part of that video was a like vague timeline at like updates and stuff that placed the next gen version of the game tentatively at like the end of 2021, which is like, I feel like that's, I mean, you know, obviously like the situation is fucked, but it's like, I think that's too long to like recover.
It is.
Like when you have a full year of people being cold on that game, I don't know if you're going to be able to relaunch it and get people to come back in.
Yeah, I mean, and also like it speaks to something that I think has also been undercovered, that it is not particularly great on PC either. Like, again, my brother now has the state-of-the-art graphics card that this was ostensibly made for.
Yeah, there's like only one graphics card that's better than the 3080, the 3090, and that's like $2,000 or some shit.
Yeah, and the 3080 is like what, if you're actually going to play this game, like it kind of requires for ray tracing and all that stuff. And like, it doesn't run very well. Like it runs better than anything like on a console today because it is a more powerful graphics card. But like compared to other things, it's not particularly well optimized. It's very buggy, all that stuff. And you would assume that if you had a good PC version, it would be a relatively, big quotes around relatively, simple task to get that on PS5 and Series X because the power differential is not that huge.
Sure, yeah.
And we get that relatively frequently now. But like. The fact it's going to take another year also says like, well, just like there's no version of the game that's in a good enough state.
Yeah, because obviously they need to make the game stable enough in order to like with those ports as well. Yeah, that's like every version of the game is on fire. Obviously, the base PS4, Xbox One versions are the most on fire.
They're unplayable, but
but every version of the game is on fire to some extent, and so them trying to both make new versions for the PS5 and the Series X. And the Series S, and also fix everything that's on the existing versions, and then also, they have pre-announced DLC plans that they haven't like rescinded completely. So presumably that there's some plan in there of like making new content, which is their only hope, I think, of like saving the game at all in like the public eye. Is they need to both have good new versions of the game out on new consoles and new content to go with it. Because I think that's the only chance they have. That's the only hope of a like Final Fantasy 14 or Destiny-esque like reevaluation or whatever by the public.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough because I think when you try to list the like, what are the other comparable situations, it's tough to find the right analogy for this game. I hate when people break out the Destiny analogy for everything. Destiny was the thing that's different about Destiny from Anthem or Final Fantasy XIV or any of these other ones we cite is that the things that are still most fun about Destiny today were there on launch day. And that's the big difference. Like, Destiny had a lot of rough spots, but its core was really good. And so it was not, like, no one was, like, unwilling to stick around with that game because in the meantime, you could still shoot aliens in the head and it was super satisfying. Yeah. This, I think, is more on the Final Fantasy XIV side of things, where it's an unmitigated disaster. The thing about Final Fantasy XIV, though, is that it was Final Fantasy. Like, Square Enix had a vested fucking interest in making sure they did not tarnish the Final Fantasy brand name, and also what that required was a complete replacement of the team.
Yeah, I mean, the Final Fantasy, like the Final Fantasy XIV one is also one that you cannot really compare to others because they didn't like rehabilitate Final Fantasy XIV. They just made a new video game and called it Final Fantasy XIV. They just sort of got rid of the old one and just made a brand new video game.
Literally, they nuked the servers, put a new one up, and now it is one of the most beloved games on Earth. So, like, that is the ultimate success story, but it is also extraordinarily drastic. They're not doing that. They're not going to make Cyberpunk 2078 and, like, redo it.
Yeah, or like, well, it would just be, here's Cyberpunk 2077 again. It's a completely new video game. We erased the old video game. Here's a new one that we spent all this money and time making.
Cyberpunk 2077: A Realm Reborn.
Yes, we've made a new one. Here you go.
So I don't know, because like the thing is, when we talk about these success stories, people always go to like Destiny and Final Fantasy, which for the reason we've just laid out are special. There's not a lot of other examples of like the stuff coming out like this and then succeeding later.
And well, like the only other examples that are there are things like Rainbow Six Siege that are like small hits when they originally come out and then build up momentum in larger communities as updates and things happen. But like the main thing that all those games have in common is that they're all live games.
Right.
And that's why Cyberpunk 2077 needs to have some
Diablo
content.
3 also, which the same thing. Diablo 3 is like Destiny. The good stuff was always there. It just needed to be pulled out, kind of.
But like you have a more live service game that is like repeatable and all those things, so like you can get people to come back because that's what the game is. With something like Cyberpunk 2077, it would be like if you try to remake a Mass Effect or something. Like if like or like it would be like Mass Effect Andromeda. Like Mass Effect Andromeda, there was no hope if I like ever of that game getting turned around because like how would it? Like the game's bad, it's buggy at launch. Like you can fix up some of the stuff that's like broken completely about it, but you can't redo the launch of this single player game that like the majority of the people who were really interested in it bought it at launch. Either they liked it or they didn't like it or whatever, but they're not going to come back to it and buy it again. Like you fucked up that launch, you fucked up this like the one chance you have at launching a single player game like that.
Yeah. So it is a weird situation.
Yeah.
I'm very curious what happens to CD Projekt after this and where they go and what the future of Cyberpunk is, and it'll be an ongoing story. But it's also such an incongruous ending to this generation, because at the end of this generation, if you take Cyberpunk out, we actually saw a ridiculously healthy technical games were coming out in incredible form, like the PS4 exclusives, obviously, but on Xbox also you had some incredible stuff coming out. It's just this and the cross-gen games, you didn't hear a million things about Assassin's Creed Valhalla is broken on Xbox One. Didn't run as well, but it was fine.
Yeah, it felt like we got to the end of this generation and it's things had kind of matured, where it's particularly early on you had like 2014 was just a bunch of fucking fires all over the place with felt like every other game came out like a Master Chief Collection or Destiny or whatever, and there people were hating it, or studios releasing apology letters was a thing that was common in 2014. And then now we've gone a long time where it feels like that's not a normal thing anymore. And CD Projekt Red has to release a new apology, whatever it is, every other day. To the point where, one thing I realized the other day is that game's still not on fucking PSN. No. And that's something that, none of this new round of news has addressed at all. Is there a timeline? Is it ever going to be on fucking PSN again? Because this feels it's been a month, basically.
Has Sony, sat down and said, this is what it needs to do to get back in the store?
Yeah.
I'm really curious if there's, a target of, if you hit this, we'll let you in. But you're not selling a game running at, 12 frames a second in our store.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's crazy. All right. You want to move on and talk about some Batman?
Let's talk about Batman.
Mask of the Phantasm. Which I think requires the requisite background of, let's start by just talking about the animated series for a moment. Because it's one of both of our favorite series.
Absolutely.
I have not sat down and done a comprehensive watch through in a while, since I was younger.
Yeah.
But I did get the Blu-ray set over the summer that they did. I'd kind of been waiting until I could get a good deal on it, and I got it. And it's fantastic. It all looks great, and I did start watching. I watched the first disc's worth of episodes, and it's fuck, this show's really good.
Yeah, I also got the Blu-ray for Christmas.
Okay,
so
awesome.
So that, because Mask of the Phantasm comes with that set, so it's I didn't even realize that. Holy shit, that is a great coincidence that we're just about to do this movie, and I got the Blu-ray in the set.
Yeah, the set is all of the episodes, including the new Batman Adventures, which they usually just call Season 3 now.
Yeah.
So you get all of that, and then you get Sub-Zero, the Mr. Freeze movie, and Mask of the Phantasm. So it's pretty comprehensive. The only thing that's missing is Mystery of the Batwoman, which is sort of the third movie they did out, between that and Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
But that's out there. You can go get that somewhere else. So that's one I've never seen. But
yeah, I've seen, so from my experience with the animated series, the last time I did a full watch through would have been the summer between high school and college. I very specifically remember being you know what, I'm going to spend this summer going back and watching these, because that was around when the Arkham games were huge and everything. It's I'm going to watch, and I ended up doing way more than I planned, because I was I'm going to watch the Batman show, and then it's then I watched the Batman show, and I watched the Superman one, and then I watched Justice League Unlimited. I basically went through the full DC animated universe of that period from when I was a kid.
Yeah. All of which are now on Blu-ray, other than Superman. That's the one we're still waiting for. I assume it's in the works. But we've got Batman Beyond, we've got Batman, all the Justice League shows. Some of them were on Blu-ray much earlier because they were done in HD. Mm-hmm. I think Unlimited was the one.
Yeah. So those shows were ones that I grew up with and remember watching regularly all throughout my childhood. And then reassessing them when I was 18 or whatever, is I'm just gonna watch these properly as a TV show rather than just something that is randomly on TV when I'm watching it. And realizing, these are this is some of the best superhero stuff ever made. And I've watched bits and pieces of it since. I've like you, when I got that Blu-ray, I watched some of the early episodes of the animated series again. Being yep, this is just a really, really great team of people who understand what's really great about these DC characters and kind of executing them without all the bullshit that I feel holds back a lot of the comic book representations of a lot of these characters. That you get this really concentrated, pure, iconic version of the character that is undiluted by all the other stuff that oftentimes holds them down, and you have to find the occasional trade paperback of a really good run of one of the characters if you want to get something this good, and it takes so much effort. You don't need that effort. Just watch the cartoons, because it's the best these characters are.
Yeah, so I think we are not alone in thinking that the animated series is the definitive overall presentation of Batman.
Yeah.
there are certainly other, we've already talked about some of them, other versions of Batman we love and things that, we think are great. Like, the animated series has a great Penguin. It's not my favorite Penguin ever. That would still be Burgess Meredith. It does, in fact, have the best Joker.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah.
That just goes without fucking saying. If you don't think Mark Hamill is the best Joker, you've either not seen the animated series, which is okay. You can rectify that.
Yeah.
Or you're an idiot. Or
Exactly.
you're a fucking idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like if you've watched a meaningful amount of Mark Hamill's Joker and you read a Batman comic book and that's not the voice you hear in your head when you read the dialogue balloons, like, I don't know what's wrong with you, because is like that, like, it changes your relationship to Batman in any other medium. I feel like when you watch the animated series, because of how much it feels like they capture the essence of every single character that they use.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're all so good. That early run of episodes is fun because it's where they're just setting up and knocking down the pins of, like, here's all the big villains. You get that Two-Face two-parter where they had Al Pacino do Harvey Dent in that, and Two-Face in that first two-parter, which was great. If you have never dived deep into the animated series, it is this month going up on HBO Max. It's the first time it'll have been on a streaming service, I believe. And it'll all be there, assumedly in the new, fresh HD versions, and that's great. It's always been kind of tough to recommend in the sense of, like, go out and buy these DVDs, but some of these DVDs are out of print. Now they got this nice Blu-ray set, that's great, but not everyone does physical media anymore. Yeah. So I'm really glad it's going to be streaming. That's awesome. There's plenty of great episodes, and it's an old-style TV show. You can just jump around to your heart's content.
Yeah, you can watch whatever. If you just want to watch Joker, and that's the thing you like, you can just watch all the Joker episodes and have a great time.
And Harley Quinn. I wonder how many people now Harley Quinn has, like, gotten so big have actually gone back and seen the initial Harley Quinn stuff, because it's great. It's different, and I do think there's, like, certainly, like, pop culture's relationship with Harley Quinn has evolved to a point where you're going to see some discomfort, I think, in some of the presentation, because she is very abused in this show, but she's great. I mean, Arlene Sorkin's Harley Quinn voice is unparalleled. She's so fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, this is Harley Quinn.
Yes.
This is, like, to me, like, every other Harley Quinn is just an impersonator, because it is like, this is where the character was crafted and formed and everything. It is like one of, like, the enduring legacies of this show is they made such a great character that, like, she is, like, an inseparable part of the Batman mythos in comic books, in movies, in whatever.
She's got her own movie. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. Very, very few in the last 30 years new comic book characters invented at all. She's, like, on that Miles Morales level of someone who got invented. And then, like, she's even different than Miles, though, because Miles was invented in comics. She was invented in a different medium and then adapted back into comics and then everywhere else.
Yeah.
So, really cool. The animated series is so good. Some of the things that make it notable, in addition to all the story stuff we're talking about, is just the production, the voice cast. We already mentioned Mark Hamill. But Kevin Conroy's Batman, I think, is pretty equally iconic as Batman.
Yeah.
There is no better Batman voice.
Yeah, there's a reason why when they made the Arkham games, they're like, well, if we're going to make a Batman game, let's get Batman in it. So someone call Kevin.
Yeah, he's Batman.
Yeah.
He just is. He is the definitive Batman to me. You have, all the other supporting cast are great. I love their Alfred. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. Is fantastic as Alfred. You've got a good Gordon, good Barbara, all of that stuff. And it is animated in the slickest fucking way.
Yeah.
Like, this is genuinely one of the best animated American shows. Maybe the best. I mean, its animation quality is genuinely superior. Like, it is incredibly well animated, but it also has this very unique style where they did it on black paper and used shadows, not just more than, like, your average cartoon, but than your average Hollywood production. Yeah. Like, it is properly noirish in its look in a way that most cartoons never go for.
Yeah, it's going to the roots of the Batman character's, like, aesthetic heart in a similar way of obviously like doing that along with the Tim Burton Batman movies. They're going for a similar thing of getting to that, like, Art Deco aesthetic, going towards that, like, 20s to 40s film noir, dark shadows, like weird angles, like big, like, you have that scene in Mask of the Phantasm where Bruce walks into his, like, office or whatever where the big portrait is hanging, and you have this weird camera shot from the top with this long streak of light from the door, and everything else is cast in shadow, and Bruce's shadow extends all across the floor, pulling it from that kind of German expressionist usage of shadows and imagery. It is just a constantly gorgeous looking show that is always thinking about how this aesthetic tradition matches with the Batman character, and sort of keeping that as part of like the identity and the tone of everything that they do.
Absolutely. And this is where you've got to mention the Tim Burton movie, because the original 1989 Tim Burton movie, we have plenty of issues with it, but one of the things it does beautifully is the mise-en-scène.
Yeah.
And because it was such a hit with this weird-ass mise-en-scène, when they then went to do the cartoon, the creators had real free reign to do that and even do it more, because now it's a cartoon and you can go even further with it. So I really think like if a more typical director had done Batman 89, or if it hadn't been a hit, you know, we wouldn't have gotten these series at all, or it would have had to be much more conventionally animated. And thank God, like, this confluence of events happened, because it's so cool. And to give a sense of the timeline, the show premiered on September 5th, 1992. So that was a little after Batman Returns. Mm-hmm. Batman Returns is summer 1992, despite being a Christmas movie. It's weird, but they did it in the summer. So you would have had the two Batman movies, and then this would have been following off Batman Returns. It aired 85 episodes in its original form over 2 seasons, but it was a syndicated show, so season is kind of a weird thing. But it aired for 3 years, from September 92 to September 95. And then after that, you had it's sometimes thought of as season 3. It like continuity wise is the same show, but has a completely different animation style. The New Adventures of Batman, which aired alongside the Superman show, and they redid the art style sort of to match what Superman was doing.
Yeah, with a crossover, the World's Finest crossover, which is like a 2-part episode.
Yeah. And I think everyone agrees that like the animation in that 3rd season is not as interesting. It's still good. Like it has, it's obviously like well animated, just at the level of like the animation is good. The art style is not as bold or interesting. I think that art style fits Superman better.
Yeah, it's something where it's like I think it works well for Batman because that's basically then what they take aesthetically for Justice League. Yeah. And when it's like Batman is not the star of the show, I think it like fits better there. Yeah. But yes, when it's just the Batman show, I agree that it's a little bit too sort of fluid and sort of light, versus like there's just a like sense of weight and heaviness to the character designs and the animation style and like the sort of gritty feel of the dark shadows and everything.
Yeah. Although at that, we should say season 3 is much more of a Batman and Friends show, because it really focuses on the extended Bat family. So it works well enough for that. But yeah.
Yeah.
If you're watching it and you get through episode 85 and then you watch 86 and you're like, what the fuck happened? This is different. It's technically a different show.
Yeah.
They just, now we all package it together because it's easier to do that. But yes. So this movie, Mask of the Phantasm, came out, let me see. Yes, Christmas Day, or actually Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1993. So
it's funny because this isn't a Christmas movie.
No, this is not at all.
This is the one that came out at Christmas, though.
Yes. So it came out December 24th, 1993. So a little, like a year and a half after Batman Returns is when this would be, and about a year and a half before Batman Forever. So it's right in the middle there. This was originally planned as a direct-to-video release. And then I think just because the show was such a success, like out of the gate, it was a pretty big phenomenon. Warner Brothers had them sort of retool this as a theatrical film. It got a bigger budget. This movie was made for about $6 million, and they had about a year to produce it. Like the full animation was done in about 8 months, which is not a ton of time for an animated movie. No. This is much more akin, I would say, to an anime feature production, both in terms of budget and time. Yeah. This would actually be very high budget for an anime movie at a time. Like Akira in '88 was $5.5 million, and this was about $6 million. So it's really on that level, and I think has a similar kind of animation quality. It is clearly like a step above the TV show.
Yeah, but it's also like it's like about a 70-minute long movie, so it's also not going for like a huge scope. Like you can definitely like feel. I think it's like good that this is what the movie is. That it is like sitting like in this middle space between like a big budget theatrical animated film and a direct-to-DVD or direct-to-video release, which is what the subsequent animated series movies would be.
Yes, it's about 76 minutes and really did set the tone, because most of DC's animated stuff since then has been around 75 to 80 minutes.
Yeah. And it turns out that this is so far the only Batman movie we've watched that isn't like 30 minutes longer than it needs to be.
Yes, no, this movie is perfect length. It feels much longer than it is in a good way. In that, like, if you lay out everything that happens, it feels crazy that they pack it into 76 minutes. And honestly, like, I've seen quite a few of the DC original movies from the 2000s. You have as well. And there are some great ones, like Under the Red Hood. But in general, none of them use their format or running time anywhere near as good as this does.
No, yeah.
And this feels like a proper theatrical movie. Like, despite its direct-to-video roots, like, you watch the theatrical version on a big screen on Blu-ray, and it is gorgeous, and it looks properly theatrical. It does not look like other American animation. So I think if like your only exposure from 90s animation is like The Little Mermaid and stuff, you'll be like, this looks cheap. But if you know anime and other stuff, and if you know what this looked like on TV, you're very impressed by it.
Yeah.
Which is how it should be judged.
Yeah, and that it's also like what makes it special is less the like how many frames there are when Batman punches someone, but it's more about the like shot choice in the framing. And it's like the scope of the story that they tell, like that's what really is benefited by the theatrical release more than anything else.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny to say, this is somewhat stripped down in terms of story from the animated series, because there's no Robin, there's no Bat Family, there's like two basic villains, the new one, the Phantasm, and Joker. And
I don't think Robin had been in the animated series at this point yet.
He hadn't been?
Because this is like would have been after like season 1 or whatever, and I'm pretty sure he's introduced in season 2. Like,
oh man, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah. All right. Again, the show has no like episode continuity, so I forget where things are introduced. Yeah. So anyway, so never mind what I was saying. But it's a movie that is properly focused where it needs to be, because this is, in a way, the first Batman movie we've watched that is about Batman.
Yeah, it's the first Batman movie we've watched that is about Batman, and it is also the first Batman movie we've watched that is a Batman origin story, because that's effectively what it is.
It's the first theatrical film that tried to do any part of Batman's origin story.
Yeah.
You get it obliquely in the 89 movie, but I say by origin story, you get the parents' murder.
You
don't get
his
else.
Motivation, but you don't get a like narrativization of it, or a characterization of it, really.
Yeah, this is the fullest origin story you get on film until Batman Begins.
Yeah, and it is interesting because it is loosely based on some little bits and pieces of Batman Year 1 and Year 2, which were comic stories that were out around this time. But it is largely an original story. Like Phantasm is a completely original character. Andrea is a completely original character. Like some of like the ideas of the plan and like what Bruce is doing here are borrowed from comic elements around this era. But broadly speaking, this is a totally original Batman story tackling the concept of Batman's origin in a totally different way, which is what makes it one of the things that makes it such a great Batman movie.
And as you've so we have never gotten to do a sit down full podcast on Mask of the Phantasm, but it's one of those movies we reference all the fucking time.
Yeah.
And I know at some point we did our list of like favorite superhero movies, which someday we'll have to update. And I know we both had this on there and probably talked about it. And I remember way back when we did that, one of the things you focused on was just like the boldness of this movie in just full on creating a new villain and a new love interest, who happen to be the same thing. You don't know that at the beginning. And then telling a version of that ties into a new origin story. And that's part of what makes it so great, is like, that's a boldness that just like, for whatever fucking reason, superhero stories are so weirdly reluctant to create new villains in cinema and even in animation. It's very weird.
Yeah, everything, it's like superhero adaptation stuff is always in this really weird, like gray area where nothing ever really ventures too far outside the box. So it's like, generally speaking, you don't invent a new character that doesn't have some source in the comic book. You don't go for some like totally new theming or whatever it is. Like, you're sticking close to like things that were founded in the comic books. And yet you almost never do actual adaptations of comic book stories. Like, that is exceptionally rare. Like, the animated series would do it for individual episodes, because obviously they have to tell a bunch of Batman episodes. It's slightly different than movies. But it's like, there are almost no movies. Is there any theatrically released superhero movie? Like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
The closest would be Civil War, but Civil War has...
That's the same thing of, like, you're taking some of, like, the theming that is the same, but, like, it is completely different than what comic book Civil War is, in almost every regard.
Yeah, Spider-Man 3 has Black Suit, Spider-Man, and Symbiote. It's not really an adaptation.
Yeah, it's not an adaptation of that story. Like, here's a couple of iconic shots, a couple of iconic scenes. And it's like,
you do get it in the DC movies now, the direct-to-video movies. They do it more and more. Most of them are utter shit. Like the ones that are original stories tend to be the good ones. I guess Under the Red Hood is the
I mean, actually, occasionally you get, like, with Under the Red Hood, where it's actually better than the comic book inspiration that it comes from, because it gets to get rid of all the comic book bullshit and just tell its story.
We're getting Long Halloween this year from DC. So
you get those in the DVD, like, direct-to-video releases. But for whatever reason, movies just sort of, they don't want to just adapt the comic book story. nor do they want to do something that's totally new. And like, you know, that can be fine, but it always feels a little bit awkward to me in some of those movies where like a lot of times they just can't quite navigate that path properly. And here with Mask of the Phantasm, they're just like, no, fuck it. Like, we'll take some inspiration from the source material because you're always going to. You're doing Batman. But let's make our own story and our own character and tell that story within this movie. And one of the benefits of that for the movie as well is that the movie gets to exist like on its own. Like, even when it is technically connected to the animated series through its casting and its aesthetics and all that, and like the people who made it, like narratively speaking, it doesn't even fit into the continuity of the animated series because Joker, I think, pretty like clearly definitively dies at the end of this movie.
Yes.
Andrea kidnaps him and murders him off screen and escapes. And it's like, this is not where the Joker dies in the animated universe. So like he appears in many episodes, not just in Batman, but in like Justice League and stuff past this point. So it is this thing where the movie just gets to kind of exist as a story unto itself. As a very unique Batman story, and there's something about that is like so refreshing amidst the like vague adaptation sort of like swamp you're in with most superhero films.
Which is part of why it's so disappointing this movie bombed. Because they gave Warner exactly what, you know, more went above and beyond with what they were going to give Warner for a theatrical feature, because they gave them this. You do not have to have seen a second of the animated series to enjoy this.
Yeah.
There are no like I'm obviously like Gordon and stuff is in the animated series, but it's not like the gangsters here have a rich backstory in the animated series you need to know to understand this. It is as standalone a Batman movie as either of the Burton movies. More satisfying than either of those. It comes out in theaters. I think it has a decent release, not like a giant, you know, obviously big release. And it does okay. It does about $5.5 million. Actually, no, it doesn't do okay. It bombs horribly. It does not make its budget back. I think over time this movie has made plenty of money for Warner Brothers.
Yeah, it's like made a lot of money in home releases since. Yeah.
I mean, this movie, its legacy is the home legacy of DC movies.
Yeah, I mean, I have now owned this movie 3 different times because
Yeah.
I have it on VHS, I have it on DVD, and now I have the Blu-ray with the box set.
Yeah, I have it 3 times because I bought the DVD, the Blu-ray, and then the Blu-ray was in the box set as well.
Yeah.
So same thing here. Yeah, so this movie's real legacy is on home video, but I wish it had had more of a legacy in theaters, because I think if this had done decent business, like 50 million, 100 million, it was never going to make Batman or Batman Returns money. And part of that is it's this awkward positioning where I think if this came out today, it would have a much better shot. But Batman was, like, the animated series was already in a weird place in the early 90s in that it is airing with other kids' shows, and it is not inappropriate for kids, but it is also not like, you know, if this was airing next to DuckTales on, you know, it's a very, and DuckTales is also a wonderful show, but it's a very, very different thing.
Yeah, tonally, like, it's something where, because Batman, the animated series, is one of a series of shows that starts off a trend of, like, it's like you have stuff like that, you have gargoyles, like, even like the dark Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon is part of that tradition of like starting to introduce, partially influenced by anime becoming bigger over here, like more slightly like, it's not like adult oriented, but it has more adult type like narrative content, like deeper stuff, like longer, more complex storylines that aren't relying on like gags and stuff like that every 30 seconds to keep like the audience's like assumed attention span. And yeah, you're getting that starting, but it's not really like cemented as an expectation in American animation at this point.
Yeah, and this becomes very popular on television, but I think in the theatrical space, like, I don't think Warner knew how to market this. I don't think the audience knew what to make of it, because it's like, I think a lot of people thought, oh, this is the kids' Batman movie out here, and they don't go see it. And it's not. I think if you enjoyed the Tim Burton Batman movies, you would enjoy this just as much, if not more. But I think at the time it would have been really hard to get people to understand what this thing was. Yeah. And so it took a lot longer to forge a reputation. Luckily it did. But I can imagine if this had been a theatrical hit, even a modest one, like Spider-Verse was. Spider-Verse didn't make $1 billion, but it was a modest hit. And clearly, like, we're going to get more stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think the history of superhero movies would have been different. But hey, we've got it, and it's wonderful. And let's talk about it, Sean.
Absolutely.
So, as you say, this is a bit of an origin story because... And here's actually where I want to start.
Okay.
This is the thing that struck me most watching it last night and having my, like, film scholar cap on. This is a film noir. Mm-hmm. It is not an homage to a film noir. It is not a pastiche of a film noir. It is just a film noir. Yeah. It could have been made in the 40s if you had animation like this and Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill were alive. Like, it is a film noir. It is like the one I would say it is most comparable to is Out of the Past by Robert Mitchum with Kirk Douglas, which is kind of one of the definitive film noirs and has the femme fatale and the flashbacks, and like it checks all the boxes. But this movie also, like, you could teach a class on film noir through Mask of the Phantasm because it checks every fucking box. It has the mysterious femme fatale. It has the, dark, brooding male anti-hero. It has the fatalistic ending where the hero loses utterly.
Yeah.
And it has a flashback structure that isn't just there for exposition or an interesting structure, but it is about how the past is present and continues to haunt and is inescapable. And that, you have these flashback scenes in this movie that start really cheery and happy because he's with Andrea and it's wonderful, but it is, there's so much melancholy to it because it is explicitly framed through the lens of Batman looking at photos and looking at her in a restaurant and it being completely lost and knowing that he lost all of this and is fucked now. And that is how the past is present. And these are all noirish themes on top of the style, which is pure film noir. It is amazing. Like, there are so many genre exercises in Hollywood today that are rarely actually examples of that genre. They are pastiche, they are homage, something like that. This is just the real fucking deal.
Yeah, and one of the things that's remarkable about it is that is always been like a part of sort of the aesthetic roots of Batman, but it's rarely been something that is like actually executed in like a narrative sense within Batman stories. Lots of Batman stories gesture towards it, they try to do it, they hint at it, and they aesthetically like homage it all the time, but you almost never get what feels like an authentic execution of those sorts of themes and ideas, partially because they are, broadly speaking, antithetical to the concept of a superhero story. And so what like Mask of the Phantasm does, and this is part of what I was saying earlier, that like I think it was ultimately to this movie's benefit that it didn't have like a crazy huge budget and it was 2 hours long or whatever, is that the scale of the movie as a Batman story is very small. It is extremely small. There's no it's like the Christopher Nolan movies that try to do a little bit of like gesture towards the themes of like maybe like being Batman is bad and maybe this is like bad for Bruce Wayne and like that kind of stuff. That this movie is very focused on is like, what is the impact of this on Bruce? Like, how is him being Batman like a state of failure in the present for Bruce Wayne? And a lot of other movies and stories try to gesture towards that. But like with the Christopher Nolan movies, all those movies culminate in like, Gotham's going to get blown up, or like these 2 boats full of like thousands of people are going to be killed. And so it always feels like, oh man, like the trauma of being Batman, and like if he could just sort of like find a way to be happy. But if he did, then all these people would be dead. So it's like the conclusion at most of those Batman stories of, is it bad for Bruce Wayne to be Batman, is always like, no, because like the city would be in like a nuclear flame right now if Batman was not Batman.
Literally, that's what The Dark Knight Rises is.
Exactly, right? It escalates in each of those movies. And so it's like, and that's not just those movies. That's like the most broad example that people would know. That's true in like most of the comic book stories and stuff like that as well. You end up with some massive scheme where, the Joker's going to like turn everybody in Gotham into like Joker people or whatever it is. It's like very common. You want to ramp up the stakes in a superhero way. And Mask of the Phantasm doesn't have any of that. Like, it's to the point where Batman doesn't save anybody in this movie because nobody is at threat other than like 4 mob bosses. That's it. Those are the only people that are in harm's way. Like, the crime being committed, like, you probably don't want random vigilantes going around and murdering mob bosses, but it's not like someone's going and murdering like innocent people or kidnapping them or trying to like destabilize the government or whatever it is.
The worst case scenario in The Dark Knight Rises is that Gotham will be nuked into non-existence.
Yeah.
The worst case scenario in Mask of the Phantasm is that 4 mob bosses, including the Joker, will die, and it happens.
Yeah.
The worst case scenario happens.
Yeah, and that those people will die, and that Andrea will be lost in her like the darkness of revenge and all those kinds of things, and she will be lost to him.
Roger Ebert has a famous quote, and I don't remember what movie he was talking about. It's an earlier superhero movie, but he was saying he did not feel it like successfully merged film noir with superhero. It might have been one of the Burton movies. And he says the thing that holds it back is that superheroes are incompatible with the idea of noir because the idea of noir is that there are no more heroes. Yeah. There are no more heroes. And the thing is, Mask of the Phantasm is totally about that idea. That Batman isn't really a hero in this movie.
Yeah, I think there's no way to watch this movie and not come away feeling like Bruce Wayne ending up as Batman is like an abject failure of him as a person in the world, that this is where he ended up as. That it is like, I think, just objectively bad that Batman exists at all. And that's something that so many Batman stories try to do, but I can't think of a single one that is like successful in the way that this one is successful.
And honestly, Sean, this is one of the reasons why I have drifted more and more towards the Adam West series as I get older, because in its silliness, I think there's an actual maturity in choosing to kind of sidestep the question and being about much more a Boy Scout version of Batman, where you don't have to have these questions because like it's much more about the insanity of the world and like counterculture and stuff. Because when you do the serious, gritty Batman, these are the brick walls you hit. And I think the animated series hits them sometimes too.
Yeah.
There's an episode I've talked about on this podcast before where Batman is put on trial by all the people in Arkham, and there's this prosecutor who wanted to get Batman off the streets because he's a reckless vigilante. And that episode comes so close to delivering an interesting critique of Batman, and then because it's a TV show that has to air every week, it has to ultimately affirm him so you can tell more stories. Yeah. And this movie, being a 75-minute movie, does not feel the need to really do that.
Yeah, and so it gets to have, like you said, this authentically film noir storytelling style that is able to actually tell this Batman story that Batman stories like to go towards and always end up really failing at. And it is like, in that element of Batman is also like why you went to Adam West, I think is one of the main reasons why I tend to prefer the like Bat family style Batman who has Robin and Nightwing and Batgirl and all that, because that is a different vision of Batman who is on the other side of all that shit. And he has like grown past it, and he has learned how to make attachments and care about people. And it's like, I really, really, really love that version of Batman.
I think you're right. I think that's the Batman who like gets through this period of darkness and evolves enough to have a mature outlook on the world and have other people in his life.
That's like the Batman that if you watch the Justice League cartoons, that's how that character, where that character goes. And it's like one of the reasons why I like his friendship with Superman and stuff is because it fixes that problem that when you're stuck with the more like Frank Miller-esque, like Frank Miller-inspired character that is, get rid of fucking Robin, get rid of all this shit, get rid of like all this bullshit, and just focus on Batman fighting like gangsters, and occasionally the Joker shows up, and you're like mired in this like repetitive, is he the Joker, like did they create each other, is Batman really bad, blah, 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 blah. And it's like you never end up with anything that's a satisfying theme at the end of it, because you're always blocked by the essence of like what you're trying to do with the character as a superhero rather than as a film noir-esque detective hero.
I think one way to say it is that the Bat family is really necessary for an ongoing serialized Batman.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do the closed-ended movie approach, which all of the movies have chosen to do, you kind of have to do some sort of indictment of Batman. And I think this is the only movie... I think Batman Returns does to a more oblique degree, but I think this movie does it to a more like sharply pointed social critique idea of you have to indict the character to a certain degree. And it doesn't mean you dislike or find Batman uninteresting. It's not subversive in that way. It I think values the character a lot by like putting this much thought into it. But this movie does it obviously better than any other theatrical Batman movie. There's no doubt.
Yeah, without a second thought. Yeah, and that is like one of the things that I focused on a lot in watching it this time. Kind of like with you, with like looking at the film noir elements. Like I know that they were inspired by a lot of Orson Welles' movies from the 40s and the early 50s, like Citizen Kane. And
it's definitely got a lot of Citizen Kane in there.
Yeah, like you can see that in a lot of the framing. You can see that in like the narrative, the flashback stuff, and that structure. Like, and you just like that whole period. And The Third Man, which is not a Orson Welles movie, but he's in it. Like a lot of those like themes. Like that's where I go with my personal experience with film noir. And it was like I was surprised by how much. Like watching this movie like really critically, which I don't feel like I've done in a while. I usually put on, I've seen this movie like fucking like 10 times or something at this point. I usually just throw it on and say like, I want to watch a good Batman movie and just enjoy it. But like really sitting at it like, okay, we're going to do a podcast on it. Let me really focus on it. And that was the stuff that I was surprised at how well Master of the Phantasm holds up in that lens that you would use to analyze like classic films in that genre.
It's like better through that lens. That's why it's a great movie. Like I have never enjoyed it as much as this viewing, watching with the knowledge that I was going to have a long conversation the next day and watching critically.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's like how much is there and how much like legacy and history the movie's pulling on and how well it's executing on its ideas. It's like there is that depth there for you to watch and be like fully engaged as a viewer with all of your experience and everything we've have like grown up and learned so much about movies and storytelling and all that. And it's like the movie has that much more to give when you're watching it with that critical lens.
Like just structurally, the movie is so good in how it employs the flashbacks. Because one of the biggest mistakes proto-noirs and just any kind of movie now with a flashback structure makes is we're going to have one scene in the present, one scene in the past, one scene in the present, and kind of boop, 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 boop. And that's never how it works.
Yeah.
Like, the film noirs knew this, that if you're going to have a flashback, you go back and have an extended sequence of multiple scenes that kind of string together and give you a full sort of thematic idea, and then you go back to the present. And this movie, this is also sometimes, I think people think of it as the Godfather 2 rule, because that's one of the big things that Coppola originally edited that movie as past, present, past, present, past, present. And then George Lucas said, this thing is 5 hours long and makes no goddamn sense. And Coppola re-edited it, and now all the flashbacks are in these big chunks. And it's one of the best edited movies of all time. And so movies that draw on that are really good at this structure. This is one of those movies that does that very, very well, where the flashbacks are highly motivated by what Batman is doing in a super film noir way, down to the glittery, like, watery transition into the past, which is straight out of old film noirs. And then you come back when, like, an idea has been fully thought through, and then you continue with the story. But then also the flashbacks end at a point where you're able to go beyond them in the story, which is also very film noir. That flashbacks usually take up the first half, but not the second. So it is just holistically a well-structured movie.
Yeah, and it understands to use the flashbacks as because it's a parallel story structure for that first half, right? That you're like getting, it's not just like here's like one random scene with Andrea and then here's another random, right? It is telling a, like, if you strung them together in the Godfather Part 2 way, like there are two distinct stories there that are happening in tandem of being set up to see Bruce's potential happiness, and then how that slips through his fingers, and then that's when it hooks into what is happening with the case that he's working on. But developing that is like there's like a clear through line and a plot line that if you wanted to, it would be a much weaker story. But you could do the like, well, let's re-edit it for TV and make the like flashback episode basically that tells that one story like consecutively all the way through. Wouldn't be as interesting as a story, but the plot is so tight that it would make sense 100% edited that way.
Yes, and it is all, and it also, like, as film noirs are doing, disguises that the plot of the present day stuff is somewhat thin. Like, it is not its own, and like by design. The first half of that movie is a mob boss gets murdered, Batman starts investigating, another boss gets murdered, and he's still investigating, and then Andrea shows up, and that's kind of it. And it's because the drama is internal. This is not a fate of the world situation. And so the flashbacks represent internal drama.
Yeah.
And that's what you get here. The Phantasm themselves, should we talk about that as like the original villain for this movie? It's a really cool design.
Yes, yeah, with the big crazy knife hand.
Yes.
Yes, and that I like. There's like a like vague Scooby-Doo quality to the Phantasm that I just adore. Right, like the smoke in the sense of like trying to pass itself off as this like, you know, what the Joker calls it, the Ghost of Christmas Future.
Yeah.
Which is very funny. And as something spectral when it is something very real, right?
Yes.
Which it hooks into. I mean, so much of the movie's ideas of like that. The thin barrier between the past, the present, and the future, and like what the future might be, and how that is like, you know, as the movie goes on, the vision of the future is more desolate and barren, represented in the like future theme park, right? And it's like that sense of this specter that is in the background, like causing all this to happen, like as a symbol, is very effective.
And I think the individual scenes with the Phantasm are just so fucking good. They are so well staged. Particularly for me, one of the best staged moments in this whole movie is the graveyard scene where the Phantasm winds up pushing over the gravestone on the guy. But that entire the framing, the animation design of the graveyard, the overall atmosphere, the shot choices. I mean, and this is holistic to the entire movie. Every fucking single shot choice in this movie is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But like that is one of those scenes where it comes together and you are just on the edge. I know he's gonna die. There's no tension for me, except that it is so good I'm on the edge of my seat. Like, what's the next shot gonna be? Is almost like I want to see how they're going to depict all of this. And I feel like most of the Phantasm scenes do something like that, where like it is, as you say, it's a fairly goofy villain at core, but it is so well staged throughout all of this, and it is a little self-aware of the goofiness. That it just works completely.
Yeah, and that, like, it's one thing that's to the movie's credit is that the movie never forgets that it's a cartoon. It's like the Phantasm is very cartoonish, and then the Joker obviously is extremely cartoonish because that's what he is as a character. But the movie is not, while it is still like tackling more adult themes and complex story structure and all that stuff, it is not embarrassed of being at its core an American cartoon.
Oh, totally. And I think that's that's a really good point, because the Phantasm wouldn't work in live action.
Oh, yeah.
You just couldn't do it. And you could totally do it here. And I think that is actually a thing that some future DC movie productions will suffer from, is being embarrassed to be animation, or like not using the full resources at their disposal. And it's like, well, clearly they just wanted to make the live action Dark Knight Returns or something, but they had to do it animated, and okay. I don't think that's actually a good example, because that one is pretty well done. But like, you know what I mean.
Yeah, but it is here. They're just like, they embrace the, like, it's very Scooby-Doo on purpose, right?
Yes.
It is like, because Scooby-Doo also in its own way is pulling from similar aesthetic inspirations as what Batman does.
Yeah.
And so it is like living within that tradition, just executing it in a much more serious story. And there's something about that like, it helps suck you into the setting and the world and like the rules that they have established.
Yeah. I had also forgotten the thread of this movie, that is, the Phantasm is, I don't think on purpose, framing Batman. And again, I say not on purpose, because it's because the gangsters and the cops see a big shadowy figure and they assume it's Batman. And so you have this whole thread of the movie where Batman is being framed, and Gordon, because he is a thoroughly irresponsible police commissioner, is saying, no, you will not take down that lawless vigilante. And then the bad guys want to take down the lawless vigilantes. That's always something that I love when you go back to like super like traditional Gordon takes of him as the ultimate defender of Batman.
Yeah.
Is when you think about it in a real sense, you're like, oh, he's terrible at his job.
Yeah, it's like, it is this like, how has he not been fired yet? Like how do you like point at because he is the one dude mayor of Gotham, or is he like running for mayor?
He's a city councilor.
He's city councilor. That's what it is. Yes, it's like, how do you point at your city councilor, which is effectively like one of Gordon's bosses, and say, it's like, I will have no part of it. Like, if you want to get Batman, you could do it yourself. God damn it! And shuts the door. It's like, man, I hope you've got like something else lined up, or enough like, you know, in the bank, because boy, you're not going to be police commissioner for much longer.
And I love Gordon. I'm having fun with it. But yes, and this version of Gordon is definitely classic. And that's one thing that like I'm kind of surprised the movies have never done anything different with Gordon, because that's totally how he is in the Chris Nolan movies too, obviously. So anyway, but yeah, so you have all of that, and you have this thread of Batman being hunted, which leads to one of the best Batman action sequences ever, when the police actually make an attempt to catch Batman, and he is very, very nearly caught. Yeah. Which is one of my favorite scenes in this movie, because like the only other comparable scene I can think of is there's one in Batman Begins where there's the big police chase where he rides the tank over the buildings.
And both of those are inspired by Batman Year One, which has another he's trapped by the police in a building and has to try to escape scene.
Yeah. But in Batman Begins, it's very triumphal in that the police never really have anything on him, and in this it is, he would have been caught were it not for Andrea driving up in the car.
Yeah, and this is like another like film noir tradition, is like your like hard-boiled detective dude needs to get the living shit kicked out of him at some point in the movie, right? In Chinatown, you have to have Jack Nicholson has a broken nose for like that entire movie, because he's got his fucking nose broke.
It's such a good action scene where he like puts the cape and the cowl on the thing, and then it gets pulled up and they're just shooting the shit out of it. That's another notable thing about this movie, is in the TV show they couldn't fire guns.
Right, yes.
Because it was on Fox for kids, basically. And so it had, like, content restrictions. And there are guns in Batman the Animated Series, but they don't get fired. And in this movie, you can tell that they were like, oh yeah, we're going to fire some fucking guns, because they fire a lot of guns in this movie.
Yeah, there's that great part where, the cape goes flying out, like, connected to the helicopter, and it's just like, shoot him, and every single cop just fucking sprays him. It's like fucking Sonny getting executed in The Godfather. It's like, if Batman had actually been there, would have been a bloody mess left. It is fucking ridiculous.
Oh, but it's so, and I mean, you have that everywhere, where like every time a gangster sees the Phantasm, they just completely empty their clip into it. There's one of those things, is like, that's one of the most like, okay, this is the movie version of the animated series. It's, again, it doesn't become like graphic or anything, but you do have that.
You keep on waiting for someone to say damn.
Yes.
And I don't think there's no curse words in it.
There's no curse words. But there is, on the flip side of violence, is you have sex, the other thing you can't do on a TV show for kids. And this movie is pretty sexually frank. And it's not just the one scene, I think, where you have a very clear sex scene where Bruce and Andrea go down on the bed, and then you pan up in like just an exact like quotation of every 40s movie way.
The only thing that's missing is that they're not smoking afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. You don't have that. But it's not just that. I was actually noticed that there's quite a few like just subtle sexual moments, and like the Joker even has a couple lines.
Yeah, it's the Joker in particular. Like, I didn't remember how, and it's like it's enough that like a kid's not going to notice it. It's not like, you know, it's fucking not the Penguin in Batman Returns. What I'm saying, right? But he is like very intentionally. He is a sexual character in that way that it's like because you know, as with any Batman Joker story, you can always look at it as like the Joker being this like reflection of the Batman and being some like suppressed id of Batman, and that like particularly directed towards Andrea. Like every scene that like past Joker before he's Jokerfied is in, he's making some sort of like weird look or growl or something at Andrea, and then every time he refers to her, he always calls her the babe or whatever, and the way he interacts with his like weird fake robot wife lady.
One of my favorite moments is he's with his fake robot wife lady, and he does this thing where he says like he compliments her and then smacks her on the ass. Is one of those moments that's like, wow, I actually can't believe they got away with that. Because I mean it's a robot, so it's like, and it's the villain, so it's a very different. It's contextualized, but it is like, I mean, it's very 40s, and I think it's an interesting way they kind of, because that's the kind of thing the hero in the 40s movies would do, and that would be awful. But they do it through the Joker, and again, as you say, like as the suppressed id kind of thing. It's like this. He has the like dark nightmare version of what Batman would have with Andrea, only it's with a robot in an abandoned amusement park.
Yeah, and it's like the way that he just sort of is like so frank and open with like, again, in the scope of a kid's thing with sex and like desire and attraction in this kind of twisted way. Whereas like Batman is I'm Batman, and it's like like he technically kisses her and has sex with her, but it's like in most scenes it's like, I'm just gonna sit here in the rain because I'm Batman. And I'm a literal wet towel right now.
But I actually think it's really smart about that, because the flashback where you get the first time like they kiss and stuff is when he is watching her through the window and she's having dinner with the city councilor. Yeah. And it is one of my favorite shots in the movie is Batman in the rain watching her. And it's something that the animated series loves to do also, where they will just do a really hyper detailed still and leave it on screen. So it's not technically animation. Like, I think they animate rain moving on it. But other than that, it is a still, like, icon of Batman. It's something they're really good at doing on the show as well. And they do it there. And it's one of my favorite shots. And that's where you fade into the flashback.
Because that's where he's looking through the binoculars and you see them holding hands in the lenses of the binoculars. And then it match cuts with them holding hands in the past.
Yes. Yeah. But in that past scene is you do get, like, when she comes and visits him at the mansion, they just start rolling around on the grass. Yeah. And they are fairly, like, physically affectionate. Again, it's not like there's nudity and stuff. It's a kid's movie. But, like, it is a clear, like, sexual adult relationship. And then you have that, contrasted, juxtaposed with the Batman of the present day, who is this chaste, rock, like, statuesque figure.
He's like literally a gargoyle sitting on that building, right? Yeah. He is so removed from anything like that in his life at this point.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just one of the very smart things this movie does. So I think one way to take this would be to talk about some of the different characters, because this movie has a number of significant characters. You also have the city councilor, you have Saul Valestra, who is voiced by Stacy Keach, who I love. Stacy Keach is just one of those great character actors. If you don't know who I'm talking about, just Google Stacy Keach. Yeah. And this is technically Stacy Keach Jr., his father also in some older stuff, but you will know him from a million TV things. He's everywhere, and he has a great voice, and he voices Saul. And I also noticed this time in the end credits, he does the voice of the Phantasm.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's obviously through some kind of filter, but he's also doing those lines, and I love that. The Joker, your angel of death has come. Yeah. Every time he does the angel of death line. It's great. But your three main characters in this movie are Batman, Andrea, and the Joker. And it really is a triptych kind of thing with them, because it is about those three in this weird death dance together. And they are all done as well as they have ever been. Well, Batman and the Joker, Andrea's not in anything else. Yeah. But man, it is one of the best Joker stories, one of the best Batman stories, and Andrea is a great part of both of those stories. So where should we go from here?
I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Let's talk about Andrea and Batman, because I think it's easy. Yeah. Because they kind of come together here. Andrea, obviously the Phantasm comes with this, but she is the original character for this movie, an original love interest for Batman, for Bruce. And we alluded to this in a past episode, I think when we did Batman 89, and we talked about the Kim Basinger stuff in that movie. And Kim Basinger is great and tries very hard in that movie, but is ultimately just shot in the foot by a script that just weirdly shoves in a bunch of bad romance shit.
in a like very Hollywood, like, man, we sure don't know how to put romance into like what is like, it's got some dark shit in it, but it's really a kids movie, but we feel like it has to have romance in it because I don't know, like some weird sexist assumption about a female audience. I have no idea what the reasoning is. But
no, that's the reasoning.
Yeah.
That's the reasoning. The reasoning is, women won't see it if there's not romance. And the reason why not every superhero movie has romance now is because there's now clear audience data that that's not true.
Yeah, it's like, and finally, like enough people, like a Kevin Feige, that is sitting there just like, you guys have been idiots for fucking like 50 plus years now. Yes. Every time you make one of these movies, you put a stupid romance in it that you don't commit to. It drags everything down.
And we've talked about romance in Batman movies is usually bad. We're going to see that in Batman Forever soon is one of the worst. Batman Begins tries.
It tries, yeah.
Doesn't really work.
Tries. Dark Knight Rises kind of tries, I guess.
Dark Knight Rises is maybe the worst offender, at least of that trilogy, because it doesn't even really commit to it. I think Batman Returns does it pretty well with Catwoman in that it is pretty clearly contextualized as Bruce being kind of a gross horn dog. Yeah. And it ties into all of the sexual themes of that movie, and Catwoman gets one over on everyone. So there you go. But this movie is the only good Batman story I know of that involves an actual romance for Batman.
Yeah.
Is there another one?
Not really. I mean, the closest you get is in some of the comic books, some of like the Catwoman stuff can get okay. Like the Batman Hush. Has some good Batman Catwoman. I know that they did there's a recent Tom King written Batman story that's supposed to be good with Batman and Catwoman like trying to get married, but then they can't. But yeah, it's specifically whenever they try to do the Batman with someone who is not a supervillain, that is not Talia or Catwoman, which are his traditional love interests, but it's I've already forgotten her name.
Vale.
Vicky Vale, yes, the character who is technically from the comic books. I just have never read a comic book that she was in.
I think she is from the very old comic books that are not in trade paperbacks anymore.
Yeah, it is like this sort of weird, like wanting Batman to be with a normal person, and it doesn't work because, spoilers, Batman's not fucking normal. Like, Batman's a weirdo. He's not Superman, he's not Spider-Man, it's just not a normal part of his character. So, like, most other Batman stuff, just abandon it completely, don't even try it. For whatever reason, most of these Batman movies try to do it, and that's the Phantasm, partially because, one, Andrea is a villain, so it's like they do the supervillain rule, and so it's like it works there. But then also they commit to, well, if you're going to have Batman a romance story with Batman, it has to be about how romance for Batman is impossible, and so the only way to actually have the romance story is to have a like powerful flashback component where you look at this is where the relationship came from and why it is impossible, of like what has happened to Bruce as a human being. That has made like he can't be in relationships with people. It just doesn't function with him.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, like, it is a relationship with a quote unquote normal person in the flashbacks. Yes. She's not a supervillain yet, but he's also not Batman.
He's not Batman yet, exactly.
And that's really key. And then in the present day stuff, it is a Batman supervillain relationship. So they get both sides of it, and that's part of what makes it so brilliant and work. Yeah. And it's not like, a great love for the ages story, because that's not what it's trying to be. It is just trying to be this meet cute, they have a good chemistry, it's just fucking normal in those flashbacks.
Yeah. And it is what the movie is based on. Like, the stakes of the movie fundamentally are about Batman and Andrea's relationship. Like you said, it's not about Batman saving the city or whatever. It is about can he go back to the life that he once had and be happy? And can he pull Andrea away from the edge and prevent her from going over? And it's like, obviously the answer to the movie is like, no, like the line has been crossed so long ago. That's basically what Alfred tells Bruce at the end. It's like, no, like she became what you saw. She became the Phantasm completely years ago. Like, before you could have ever done anything about it. And it's like Batman clearly himself is like, you were at a place where it's like, that's never something you would have been able to have. Like, you would have never been able to be Batman and have a relationship, and you're never going to be able to give up being Batman.
Yeah. And this movie is one of the only Batman stories I've seen, and I've read fewer comics than you. But it genuinely does like question the Batman moment of creation, where he's like, he has made this sort of weird like vow to his parents that he's going to do this thing, and it is hanging over him like this sword of Damocles. And it's all self-motivated. There's no one's holding a gun to his head, but he feels like there's a gun to his head. And he feels guilty for being happy. But he also has the moment when he is like thinking of proposing to Andrea, and he's looking at the portrait of his parents and saying, you want me to be happy, right? Like, I can do this, and I can find another way. I can give money to the city. And he actually considers not being Batman. And you get the sense that if things had worked, it might not have happened. And I've never seen a Batman story be that open with it of like, what if he just didn't? You know? Because once he puts on the cowl, he can never take it off.
Yeah.
That's very clear about Bruce Wayne. There is no... He briefly flirts with it in this movie where he says... Where Alfred is like, maybe you'll finally hang up the cowl. And he's like, oh, maybe. But we know that's bullshit.
Yeah, there's no way. Yeah, it's one of the things that, like, it being an origin story... I think one of the things that's fascinating about it is that it puts his origin not at the death of his parents, but at this point, at the threshold of him, like, making that ultimate step. That he has been... preparing off screen or whatever ever since he was a little kid and saw the death of his parents to become Batman. He has his plan, which I love. I love every time he talks about it. Like I didn't watch it with subtitles on, but if you watch it with subtitles, you know that's a capital P ass fucking plan that he's got somewhere of how he's going to like go and solve crime in Gotham by running around and punching people. And he's a fucking karate master, and he learns all this computer bullshit. Or not karate, sorry, jujitsu, as he says, as he's practicing in his yard. And he has all this stuff that, like, you see him, like, having constructed this whole idea for himself of what Batman is going to be. And I love that whole scene that you get of him pre-Batman trying to, his, like, first time doing it. And it's like he kind of gets, he ultimately does some Batman shit, but he also kind of gets kicked around a lot.
He loses in that scene. Yeah. There's no scene in this movie where Batman is victorious.
Yeah, and so it's like, and that's where he gets the whole idea for having to strike fear in the hearts of criminals and the whole Batman concept. But you see him putting all this shit together. But I love that the movie identifies that is the point. Like, that's the point where he becomes Batman, not when his parents were killed, because there is still a chance here for him to take another path and choose not to be Batman. And
marry this woman, maybe go to therapy. Yeah. Donate some money.
Yeah, there's a million things you could do, right? And it's the tragedy of Bruce Wayne as a character is that it turns it into a tragedy by giving him a choice that there was a way that it could have been averted if it were not for his fatal flaws and like the twist of fate, right? That he is there at the grave and you see how much he has put, as you said, on himself. That this is not something that came from his parents. His parents would be fucking disgusted with him if they knew that this was like a thing that he was considering doing. Everybody else knows that this is stupid and wrong, what he is planning to do. Poor fucking Alfred having to sit there and watch this kid do this to himself. As he says earlier in the movie, like he fucking changed Bruce's diapers, right? It's like he damn well knows everything there is to know about Bruce Wayne. Yeah. And everyone's seeing Bruce do this to himself because he's so afraid of being happy, so afraid of like the guilt he has over surviving when his parents were killed, the fear he has of letting go of all that trauma and pain, and he lets his whole life be controlled by this trauma of his parents' death. And what's tragic is that he didn't have to. Clearly Andrea would have been a way out, but it doesn't have to be Andrea. It could be anybody. Like, he ultimately is the one who makes the choice and lets himself go down that hole, put on the cowl, become Batman, when there's anything else he could have done to potentially be like a happy person.
And a productive member of society in a different way.
Yes.
Because one of the other things this movie does, and it is very subtle and implicit, but I think it is pretty pointed also, is that very, very, very clearly between flashbacks and present, Gotham has gotten worse. It has not gotten better. They go to this movie is very smart about deploying that World's Fair space because you are introduced in a flashback where they go and it is like Disney's Tomorrowland. And you have this fun, like it's one of their fun dates. Then you find out it's the Joker's hideout when Sal Valestra goes there, and you get a tour of it now ruined, and then it is the site of the final battle. So it has these 3 centerpiece sequences. But it is supposed to be a big signal for you that this is what Gotham was hoping it would be, and this is like it was being developed, and like there was this big successful like amusement park thing, and like Gotham looked like it was in decent shape. Cut to, it's fucking hell.
Yeah.
Whatever Batman, maybe Batman hasn't made it worse on his own, but he sure as shit hasn't made it better.
Yeah.
Like whatever he thought he was going to do hasn't worked. Gotham has not gotten better. And it is, again, it's not something that anyone like pulls into the text. It's not like Alfred calls him out on this, but it's something that like when I saw last night watching the movie again, and I remembered the final sequence, but I forgot that they go and visit it when it's like new, and you see the World's Fair, and it just hit me like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Gotham wasn't like bad and then got better because of Batman. It was the other way around.
Yeah, no, it is that like that whole construction of the flashback. I think it is the centerpiece, like symbol of the whole movie is, that Tomorrowland destroyed, and that's like, it is, it reflects Bruce's like perspective in like the world that he lives in. That's like when he was with Andrea, there was this potential of a future, and then now that is gone after he makes the choice to become Batman, the future is desolate, right? There is no hope left there. Like you see this, like all the potential promises of this like 50s-esque idyllic existence with your housewife and all that shit and kids, like that is gone. It's corrupted. It is depreciated to the point where the only thing that is living there is now the Joker, who's like the symbol of insanity and chaos.
Yes.
That the future has like spiraled out of control, and what you were hoping for is now out of your grasp, and is like directly paralleled with his choice to become Batman.
And then in the final scene, in a very German expressionist touch, it is just completely blown to hell.
Yes. The world literally explodes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The world explodes, and he is Batman for life. He is doomed. The future is literally gone.
Yeah, that there is no hope for change or anything else because there is no future for him.
It is bleak as shit.
Yes.
And again, it's part of a commentary on the Batman character, because becoming Batman and choosing this as your means of social improvement is a tacit acceptance that structurally things will never get better. Because Batman is not a hero who inspires. He is not a hero who does anything. He doesn't go out and like build houses. He beats up criminals. He does nothing to structurally improve the system. He may save individual lives. He may save Gotham from terrorist attacks at time, but he does not structurally improve things. So to be Batman is to tacitly acknowledge that you have no capacity for structural improvement, at which point you let the world of tomorrow decay, which is what happens.
Yeah, that's like the only thing that you can think of as Batman is to live defined by and within your trauma at all times, and to express that trauma through his violence. And that's the only thing that Batman can understand or can be. And it's like, and so that is how the movie represents it. And it's one of the things that's great about the movie is that like all those ideas are through inference and symbolism more than through, like, as you said, there's like Alfred calls Batman out, but in like more oblique ways. He doesn't say it's like Batman. He doesn't do the thing we will eventually get in the Christopher Nolan movies, where you get a 5-minute speech where he says, "Batman, it's like you are a symbol of how there is no hope left for the future because you have chosen this path. You are letting yourself be defined by your trauma. I knew your parents, and when I was in Burma, I also had traumatic events when I was in the army or something."
Yeah, no, you're doing it wrong. You would start with the anecdote of him being in Burma and do a long story, and then go, now this connects to you, Master Wayne, by...
because of your trauma and because of your parents, and blah, 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 blah. And you don't get the speechifying here. It is because the movie doesn't have time for it. It's only 70 minutes. It's like you're... all this is communicated through like the gap between these flashbacks, what the like cuts between them are implying, and the symbol of like what is like just such a potent, powerful symbol of the Tomorrowland, a decade that the Joker's living in. Like just what a like fucking brilliant like 5-star idea for like the centerpiece of the climax of your movie that then like echoes throughout the whole film.
Well, that's one that is like slightly taken from The Killing Joke, because he's in an arcade kind of amusement park in that. But they tweak it to be this Disney Tomorrowland. It has a song that the robots are singing, and when Sal Valester comes, like just to underline the point a little, Joker blows all the robots' heads off and stops the song. Like, it's very pointed.
Yes.
But it's all visual data. Like, that's the thing. Like, this movie also, because the animation is so good, the animation style is so distinct, it has the confidence to tell a visual story. There is plenty of dialogue in it, but so many of the most important ideas are there visually and not in the explicit, like, dialogue, verbal text of the movie.
Yeah, it's fascinating. To go back to some of that stuff with Bruce, the one thing I love about this movie is the way they use Bruce's parents. The, like, how just, like, heavy and ominous and grim it is every time they appear. And there's something about that just feels so perverse, right? That it's like it's supposed to be this like happy thing for you, your the memory of your parents. But he has like this massive portrait of them in his office or whatever, and then you have the grave that just says Wayne on it, right? That is like, it is so just weighty every time you see them, every time Bruce thinks about them, looks at them. And it is this thing where it's like, I feel like every time that happens, it is reinforcing how wrong he is in like taking this path because of what it has turned his parents into him, right? The fact that he has to be on his knees crying at his parents' grave, pleading for them to allow him to be happy. And it's like, how far have you fallen that you have lost so much of what your parents actually were as people and what they would have meant to you, to have allowed them to become this anchor tying you down so much and causing you so much pain. And the fact that he like can never actually let it go.
And the way they become this sort of weird linchpin where it's because of visiting his parents' grave that he meets Andrea. Mm-hmm. It is because of going back to it in one of the graveyard scenes that she figures out he's Batman. One of those great like connections of past and present. And so they literally become this kind of fork in the road where it's like Andrea is the version of that symbol where he takes them with in his heart into the future and lives a life.
Yeah, and he lives the life that his parents lived and were happy with, right? He has the locket with a picture with him and Andrea in it that Andrea keeps that is a reflection of the same portrait of his parents. It's like, this is the life that you could have. Like, if you idolize your parents so much, the life you're choosing is a direct rejection of the life that they lived, which feels fucked up, Bruce.
Yes, it feels very fucked up. And again, another reason why the Bat family works in stories that do it well is because it's a weird House of Mirrors version of it, but it is him building a family.
It's him taking together other people that have been lost like he is and building a family with them.
Right, which is the healthiest way to be Batman if you've got to be Batman. But no, this is not that at all. This is not a Batman who has met Dick Grayson yet.
No.
We could say. I think you're so right. It is this heavy, weighty symbol. We haven't talked about Andrea much as a character yet. She is, I think, a really striking character. She's voiced by Dana Delaney, who's great. I think it's an interesting thing because in the first half, even if if you are film literate enough, she's the Phantasm and this is where it's going to go. They don't try that hard to hide it.
Because there's no other character it could be. They obviously do the red herring that it's her dad, but you're like, well, we haven't seen her dad in 30 minutes or whatever. It's probably not him.
And so she's a fairly simplistic character in the first half, but in that femme fatale way, and this is again where it knows noir in its bones. It is not pretending to be it. It just is it. Because that is the femme fatale, where she's like sexy and alluring and fun and offers this other life, but there's something underneath, and you move and move and move, and you finally kind of start to unwind it and figure it out, and then that's what the second half of the movie is about, to the point where in this movie she gets her own flashback, and you get to recontextualize her past through her eyes as how she was dealing with her own trauma and getting totally fucked up by all of this through her own past. And I think that structure is very good because you go from just seeing her through Bruce's limited POV to a broader POV by the end of the movie.
Yeah, and the way that she and Bruce are so similar, right? That they are both in slightly different ways, but they are both weighed down by the legacy of their parents. Bruce, but it's the thing that's tragic about it is Bruce is doing it in a way that is utterly self-constructed. You see a very healthy version of what Bruce is dealing with through Andrea's relationship with her mother, who has passed away, and she's, it's obviously it affects Andrea, but she's there at the graveyard and talking to her mom and dealing with it in a way that feels healthy and therapeutic and normal.
And Bruce that's what fascinates him in her.
Yeah.
She's like, what is this thing talking to your mother? And he just doesn't get it. He can't conceive of the version of this relationship that isn't brooding on your knees, praying silently to the god of death.
I love that flashback of awkward college age Bruce Wayne who has no idea how to interact with other people, where he's just you just keep on saying things and there's nobody else here. You said my name. I think are you talking to me? This is weird. And then later, I forget the exact line, but he just says it's oh, mysterious reasons or whatever. It's what are you trying to do? It's oh, that's secrets. It's oh, you fucking loser, you stupid nerd, Bruce Wayne. But so Andrea has that, but then she is by her father forced into this life where she did not choose for herself, right? She is pushed down this path to ultimately become the Phantasm because her dad got wrapped up in the mob and owes money and all that shit, and sort of that legacy of her father has put her down this path very directly, the one that Bruce has chosen to just go like, this is like the thing you have to do, right? You're defined by trauma. I've got to like become Batman. And she has no choice but to do that.
Yes, absolutely. It's good. You want to talk about the Joker?
Yeah.
This is the third of 5 movies out of our 10-movie series that involve the Joker.
Yeah.
The original Batman 66, and we love that use of the Joker, but it is a self-consciously more minor use of him.
Yeah, he's in the background more in that movie.
I mean, literally, and that's what's funny, is he's like taking instructions from the Penguin.
Yeah.
And he's just like along for the ride.
And yeah, that's like him in every scene.
We love it. A+, but
Right.
like in a different register.
Yeah.
Joker in Batman 89, no. There's some interesting potential there, but it doesn't work.
There's a couple good scenes.
Yeah. We're going to get to Heath Ledger's Joker, which is another A+, 10 out of 10. And then we will get to Lego Batman, which is also a Joker story, and I think a very funny one, but it's Lego Batman. It's very different.
And unfortunately, Jared Leto so far has not been in a Batman movie as a Joker yet, so we'll have to skip that one. Along with Joaquin Phoenix. It's crazy that there are 2 fucking movies that are not Batman movies that have the Joker in it. Like, I have known that for a long time now, obviously, but it is weird to think about that, like, all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
That it's like we're doing a whole podcast going through the Batman movies, and there are 2 movies that have the Joker in it that we're not going to talk about.
I know, and you know, the thing is, though, you could argue, we're not going to watch it because I hate it, but you could argue for Joker in this series because it does do the killing of Bruce Wayne's parents and origin story and all that. It's nuts. They've done the fucking origin story in Batman v Superman and Joker. It's so bad. Anyway, we're getting off track.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of Joker uses.
Yes.
I think this is like prohibitively, we haven't talked about this movie yet, but tied with The Dark Knight for the best use of a Joker in a theatrical film.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this is, and they use him in extremely different ways in those 2 movies, obviously. But this is just such a, this to me is, I think, one of the best deployments of Mark Hamill's Joker. I think the other one would be like the Arkham games. And then obviously there are plenty of good episodes. But I think in the animated series proper, this is the best Mark Hamill Joker, right?
Yeah. There's something about like his role here of, I love that he's not in the movie for the entire first half, right? It is all the first half is about the flashbacks, figuring out the Phantasm stuff. It's only in that second half when Sal goes to the future land to go call in the Joker specifically to fight Batman, and that he gets wrapped up into it. And at that point, you don't even realize that like the Joker himself does actually have a very concrete connection to everything else that's going on here.
He is also a part of the flashbacks, and that is something I had completely forgotten. Mm-hmm. And when I was watching it again last night, you keep seeing this guy in the background, and I'm like, is that supposed to be the Joker? And I just didn't remember where they were going to go with it. And it's such a great thread of the movie.
Yeah, and that he is the person who killed her fucking dad in the past before he became the Joker. And yeah, just that sense of that the Joker he lives in and represents this just like mad future that has spiraled out of anyone's control and is like decayed in this weird fucking desiccated Tomorrowland. And he's just the king living there, this like weird fucked up version of the vision of the future that like Bruce had of him and Andrea, only it's Joker and robot wife. Like that deployment of the Joker here where he feels like really properly as much a like symbol as a like actual character in the story.
Right.
I think it's like something where it hits that balance so perfectly where you're oftentimes not, I feel like, sure whether to read him literal or figuratively or like you're reading him as kind of like both in every scene and switching between the 2. He's just such a like weird, because he doesn't show up until the middle, he is such a strange figure, I feel like, in the plot.
But he's so well deployed.
Yes.
Like he is so tightly wound into the story in a way that like there are plenty of Joker stories out there. There's a lot in the DC animated movie universe that they've done where like you kind of throw the Joker in there because they got to be in there. It's the Joker, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And just there's no real sense of connection to the point where I think the fucking movie Joker doesn't tie him in as well to his own goddamn story as well as like this does, because he is this third prong in this relationship. He is this like unleashed rotted thing for both Andrea and Batman. He is not just one or the other. He is the corrosive, rotted future of both of them, and this symbol of chaos. And he is there, and that's one of the things I love about those flashbacks is he is there throughout the first half, but you don't really know it's him because they didn't know it's him. And he is this like ticking time bomb waiting to blow who's always there. And that's something that like, especially on subsequent viewings, makes those flashbacks even more just sort of like weighted with some kind of like, I don't even know what the word is, but a melancholy and a fear and like this past is broken while it's being lived, you know, in a very noir kind of sense. And it is such a great deployment of Mark Hamill, because I don't know the full history of how, because I know Joker, like when they were first planning the movie, wasn't in it. At some point he was added, and it feels like such an organic addition of like, okay, we need a proper like villain for Batman to punch in the end of the movie, for one, like on a practical level. But we also need like, because the movie can't just come down to a fight between the two of them, because it's not a physical fight; it's a fight for her soul.
Yeah.
So you need another villain. It's Joker, and then they tie him in so well. And I think one of the things about this movie that also like marks it as a movie is this is a much harder edged version of Mark Hamill's Joker than we've gotten before. I think later episodes of the TV show borrow from this movie, and you do get some like darker versions of the Joker, but I think people who know the Joker from the Arkham games, where he is much more in this vein and even darker, might be surprised if they go back and watch like Christmas with the Joker and some of the first couple appearances.
Yeah, he's oftentimes much more of an overtly comedic character in the early animated series.
Yeah. And certainly Mark Hamill always gives him that edge. And Mark Hamill is also always funny, even in his darkest appearances. Yeah. But you might just be surprised that like he started out a little softer edged, got harder edged over time. But I find him, and I felt this the first time I saw this movie back in like middle school. I felt it last time I watched it. I felt it this time. He is scary in this movie. He like is legitimately like unsettling.
Yeah, and I think it's because like you both are scared of him, and he is legitimately funny at the same time, right? That it's like he is both like very funny. Like I love the first scene he's in with Sal, and like every like weird permutation of the word, like the name Salvatore that he can come up with to thread him. Like every single line is so like overdone in the most perfect way. While you are also, you know, constantly aware of that's like he's gonna murder this old man. Like as soon as the scene is over, and obviously he does. Like this old man is fucking dead because he has unleashed the fucking devil. And the devil's gonna cackle while he murders you, right? Like it is like that feel 100%.
There's a specific turn in that scene where Sal is trying to, like, Joker is just toying with him for a while. And then Sal is like trying to push the money at him and being like, come on, you know your hands are even dirtier than mine.
Yeah.
And you see this flash where the Joker's smile drops and he is just furious. And then he puts it back on and is now in full on, I'm going to murder you mode. But in the, I'm going to try to calm you down before I murder you. And it is so frightening because, I mean, this is something that like Joker stories, this is such a hard line to walk of like the Joker's comedy and actual emotion. And I think the Joker is actually insulted by that. He's actually insulted to hear Sal say that and be like, bull fucking shit.
Yeah.
He has memories of when he was a gangster. He knows what this guy did.
Yeah, and it's like, and Sal was the one who ordered Joker to go murder Andrea's dad, right? Like, everything goes back to him.
And I think if there's anything the Joker actually hates in, like, almost a quasi-moral sense, is people not being their true selves.
Yeah.
And he's like, Sal, pull that fucking mask off, or I'm going to pull it off you and rip your face off, which is kind of what he does.
Yeah.
And it's like, because the Joker is the ultimate version of, like, he just is who he is. That's what he wants Batman to be. That's always what this is. That's the whole point of the Killing Joke, is him wanting to do that to Gordon and, like, pull the lunatic out of you. And he is incensed when this guy decides, he's like, no, you're the lunatic, not me. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to fucking kill you.
Yeah, it's like, and yes. And then this is where you get because you get him killing Sal and Sal having the fucking like grimace, like the Joker grimace. But even scarier to me is in the scene he has with Arthur, the councilman, later. Where one, you get, I love every time the Joker wears that fucking hat in the animated series. It's so good.
It's a great hat.
Him coming in with that hat, and it's like one of the great Joker moments is like the way it sort of like snap zooms into his face as soon as the Joker enters that room with the fucking hat on in the doorway. And then that whole scene where he's threatening Arthur and all that, fucking perfect. That's where you also get just a lot of like the weird like sort of sexual overtones when Andrea calls into that office. But then you get the like one of the great innovations of the animated series with the Joker is in the cartoon they couldn't really have the Joker kill people, and so what they did instead is they came up with the Joker gas, where people laugh uncontrollably like the Joker. It is like 1,000 times more fucking terrifying.
Yes.
And this is like the best scene using that, because I think they get to like make it even more overtly like unsettling when Arthur is like in that hospital bed, like controllably laughing, and you see how much pain he is in and how he cannot stop himself.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
And then you add Batman on top of that, interrogating him. Like the doctors calm him down, and then you get the lightning flash, and Batman is in the room and has been there the whole time. And then Batman is interrogating this scumbag, and he is a scumbag. You know, Arthur is a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And yet you feel for him by the end of the scene because like no one should suffer this fate.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
It's real fucked up. I mean, one of the things I love is that the Phantasm kills 2 of the gangsters at the beginning on like the hit list.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 are clearly Arthur and Sal.
And the Joker himself.
And the Joker, right. But the Joker kills those other 2.
Yeah.
And then it's down to Andrea and the Joker. And it's sort of this like, they've each done 2. Who's going to get the last kill, right? And it's so funny because like the Joker is totally on board with this mission of revenge also because of the chaos in him, and he loves that Andrea is becoming what he wants her to become. He loves that he always loves when people stoop to his level, right? Mm-hmm. And so yes, you get that. He's so good. I think the only 2 Jokers I've ever really felt frightened by are Mark Hamill and Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
And Heath Ledger does it through a slightly different way because Heath Ledger does not go for that kind of blend of comedy and drama. He is just so purely like abject that you are scared of him. And in this it is. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's because Mark Hamill has this inherent charisma to the character. He has the wordplay and the goofiness, and you do laugh at him. But you also know he is buttering you up to kill you.
Yeah. I mean, God, because there's that, with that scene with Arthur, there's that great cut where it ends with, like, Joker, like, coming over Arthur and laughing maniacally, and then it cuts in and it blends Joker's laugh with Arthur's laugh as he's in the hospital, like the pained laugh.
Yeah.
It's, like, fucking very good scene transition.
Man. Mark Hamill. He is one of our favorite people on this podcast. We talk about him all the time. And I don't know if we're clear enough that I think that's more because of the Joker than even Luke Skywalker.
Oh, yeah. No. It is just like... Because, you know, he's good as Luke in the Star Wars movies, but there's also something about, like, the experience. It feels like he brought in, like, I think, like, the comfort he has as a voice actor. Because he's done, like, lots and lots and lots of voice acting stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's something about that as, like... It has always felt to me, like, watching interviews and stuff with him, that, like, voice acting is the thing that, like, is his, like, deepest passion compared to on-screen acting, which is obviously because he's done, I mean, in the scope of his career, he's done way more voice acting than he's done screen acting.
I mean, it's a really cool second act for someone because Luke is just one of those roles that you are sort of doomed to be typecast by. Yeah. It'll shoot you into the stratosphere, but you're never going to do a movie on that level again. Like, it's just never a possibility. It's the same with, like, you know, Daniel Radcliffe in Harry Potter, or Elijah Wood in Lord of the Rings, or like Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart in Twilight have had this problem too, and have had to like, and it's so interesting how all those actors, I think, have successfully found other ways to do it. And I think
oftentimes like parlaying that into more interesting work that like deepens their like abilities as an actor.
Yeah, like and Robert Pattinson to the degree that now he's getting to come back around and have another act in that chair as Batman, which is fascinating. But yeah, so Mark Hamill went this very different route where like, okay, I'm never going to need to worry about money because those Star Wars royalties are big.
Yeah.
So like, I'm sure Batman the Animated Series does not pay incredibly lucratively, but like, I get to go be the Joker. And I'm going to have fun with it, and you always feel that. I have never heard any version of the Joker from him that sounds like it's phoned in. He is 100% on board. He is so good at it. It's taken years for me to actually hear Mark Hamill's actual voice in there because, and I feel like he's aged into it. Like old Mark Hamill today sounds a little more like the Joker than I think he did in '93.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree.
It's so funny, but it's such a transformative voice, and it's left such an impact that even when he doesn't do the Joker voice now, it's usually an impression. Like, I think Troy Baker's Joker is pretty good, but it's very clearly a Mark Hamill impression. Other ones who have done it in the animated series, like the guy who does it in Under the Red Hood,
John DiMaggio.
Yeah,
he does a good job.
He does more of a not Mark Hamill.
Yeah, he goes for something very different.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why they cast John DiMaggio, because that's like he's he's like Marcus Phoenix in Gears of War, right?
He's
like,
a super talented voice actor. Yeah.
So he like in his like vocal range is very different than what Mark Hamill goes for.
That's probably the Joker I would point to as most clearly not in the Mark Hamill mode, but like most of them go in that mode, and for good reason. Like like the Joker you get in any of the Injustice video games, like all of those, like they're going for like
something that is vaguely Mark Hamill-esque.
Yeah. And it's just, he's one of those people who has left. It's like J.K. Simmons on J. Jonah Jameson.
Mm-hmm.
No, like every J. Jonah Jameson after J.K. Simmons is doing a J.K. Simmons. Because J.K. Simmons was just J. Jonah Jameson. Mark Hamill just sort of is the Joker, and he's kind of the gold standard I think you hold everyone up to. I think there's a lot of that in Heath Ledger's performance. The way Heath Ledger does the voice very much, I think, feels like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then in this movie is where you get, with the Joker, you get two of my favorite moments. One I love so much is the Batman Joker fucking kaiju fight in Tomorrowland.
Yes.
It's so good.
It's so good.
It's just like conceptually, I don't know if that might be a reference to a comic book. I don't know. But if it is, like, that's a good comic book.
It is. Let me look it up because they were talking about it in some stuff I was reading.
Yeah, because it is just like such a phenomenal fucking idea to just, again, like render like what is happening in the movie. It feels like you're just like operating completely in symbolism at this point. That's like they're just the two of them fighting and destroying Gotham City. It's obviously like literally a representation of it, of what the Gotham City would look like in the future. But them fighting destroys the entire city, which is like, here's your whole metaphor for the Batman Joker stuff, but it's like so on point, so well done.
So here, as a visual joke, sequence director Kevin Altieri set the climax of the film inside a miniature automated model of Gotham City where Batman and the Joker were giants. This was an homage to a mainstay of Batman comic books of the Dick Sprang era, often featuring the heroes fighting against a backdrop of gigantic props.
Okay, so it's like it's a general visual homage, but like the specific concept seems to have been original to the movie.
Yeah. It's and they do like doing some of that stuff of like Batman against giant shit. Like obviously the coin is the iconic one.
Yeah, and the T-Rex and all that.
Yeah. And so there's other episodes of the animated series that play with that. But yes, I totally noticed it this time was just the Batman. I called it to. I said, "Oh my god, it's a kaiju fight!" Last night. I was like, "It's he's got the little remote control helicopters coming in,
like fucking
and Batman
King
is having to
Kong.
swat them away."
So good, it's so good. I always love that scene so much. For obvious reasons, I love it for my love of kaiju stuff. I do just think it's like such a great visual representation of the relationship between Batman and Joker. That like, this movie is, since it's not really about the Joker, it can't like spend a lot of the plot getting that like idea of their dualism and all that stuff in there. So it's like just leaning on some very on the nose imagery, but is imagery to deliver that like feeling and that idea. It is just so efficient in the climax of the movie to do it that way and to just like represent the battle between these characters.
It's also something where whenever you get Batman and Joker into a fist fight, I think it's usually pretty weak.
Yes.
Like in Batman 89, when they're on the tower or the church at the end, it's not a good fist fight. In The Dark Knight, they mostly avoid it, and then at the very end, when he's arresting the Joker on the like construction tower, they get into a fist fight near the end, and it's kind of disturbing because it just looks like Batman beating up a mentally ill guy.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't necessary, Batman. Just put the cuffs on him. Like, what the fuck? And like, this is, because it is one, it's animated, so you have a little more leeway, and because they have this incredible visual idea, it's so much more engaging than your usual Batman Joker fist fight, which like isn't ever actually a fight because the Joker can't swing a punch like Batman.
Yeah, like the thing, and that's why the animated series gets to do Batman Joker fights in a way that live action never can, is that the Joker has all his goofy bullshit that he does. He's got the remote planes, he's got the fucking hand buzzer, he's got the acid flower, like he's got his whole... Right, he's got his bag of tricks, and then once his bag of tricks is expended, there's nothing he can do to Batman because he has not trained in jiu-jitsu.
Okay, so you said that was one of your favorite Joker moments. I think I know the other one.
Yeah, the other one is his laugh at the end, as the whole future burns around him, and he realizes he has won in how he is losing.
Yeah.
It is one of, if not the best Mark Hamill Joker laughs ever. It's spine-chilling.
It's the best Joker laugh, period, in anything. Mark Hamill, Heath Ledger, anyone. It is the best because it is so... Like, that laugh, Sean, has haunted my dreams for like 20 years now. However long it's been since I saw this movie, that image of him looking around, seeing all the fire, knowing he is about to be brutally murdered and there's nothing he can do to stop it, and breaking into hysterical laughter... And then it being the specific Mark Hamill laugh that you can just feel it coming like from the soul out of him.
Yeah, completely unhinged.
Completely unhinged. It is one of those cinematic moments that is burned in my brain. I can recall it, like the framing of it, the sound of it at like any moment, no matter how long it's been since I've seen Mask of the Phantasm, and it still sends chills down my spine. It is incredible. And it's the reason why, like, to me, there's no way to read this movie where he survives.
Yeah, no, it's
he is fucking dead.
He absolutely dies at the end of that. And I love that, like, it's preceded by something that I love about the animated series of the Joker that I think they always nail is that he doesn't want to die, right? It's preceded by him with his fucking, it's so good, his little fucking jetpack with his little helmet on. He's trying to get away, and Batman like is grabbing onto him. And he's like, "What are you doing, you idiot? Like, we're both gonna die. Just let me fucking let's just get out of here. The whole park's gonna explode. Let's like live to have fun another day." And it's like, and Joker's just so sort of like put off by it's like, you come on, like what you're a fucking moron. We're both gonna get killed. It's like the Joker has no interest in dying, and I feel like there's sometimes like. Some like versions of the Joker feel too self-destructive to me, where it's like, no, like the Joker should be like his desire should be he should live fucking forever to like play with society and have his fun. And I like that, like you have that, and that's what makes the laugh that he gives once he realizes it's really over that much more powerful. Is that it's like his ideals, like the ideal outcome for him to this is that both him and Batman do get away to go have fun, and have another adventure. And so it's like him just like finally realizing, oh, it's done, and I'm just gonna let it all out while the whole fucking world explodes because this is fucking hilarious that this is how it ends for me.
Yeah, it's literally his last laugh.
Yeah.
And he gets the last laugh because he has gotten what he wanted out of Andrea. She is as bad as him, and Batman has to watch all this go down and also lose.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you're right, I think it is because it is a common theme, and not a like a bad or ill-headed one, that the Joker kind of wants Batman to kill him in that sense of like to fully turn him into this. But I also think you need to balance it with the desire of the Joker wants the fun to continue.
Yeah.
And I think the Mark Hamill one gets that right. But if he actually gets to that end point where like he couldn't possibly wish for a better death than this, if the Joker had to choose how he has to die, this is what he wants.
And I think part of it that I love is that, like, I think one of the main things he's laughing at is, like, the fucking metaphor. Everything. Because he looks around and then he starts laughing. He sees the literal future is burning to the ground around them. That's, like, it's so on the nose. It's fucking hilarious. And so he laughs at it. It's just... It's so good. It's like he becomes, like, mildly self-aware in that moment of, like, what he is living in and laughs before he goes.
And it is such a great, it is just one of the best uses of the Joker as symbol, maybe the best. And because of what is it ultimately about? It is about stabbing the knife into Bruce. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we need to go for like the end of this is the end of this movie is so fucking brutal. Yeah. It is Batman, like by the end of the movie, Batman already has like failed to save 4 people. And now it is just, you know, I don't think he particularly cares whether the Joker lives or dies. It is, can I stop Andrea from losing herself?
Yeah, no. and can I stop her from losing herself, and can I ever be happy?
Yeah.
And the answer to both those questions is no.
No.
It's too late.
She becomes a, kind of murderous psychopath. The entire world of tomorrow blows up. He barely makes it out with his life. He limps home, and that's it. And that's the movie. And then he is doomed to go don the cowl and go out again. And that's the film. And that is the most noir fucking ending you could do to this. And it is just one of the best presentations of Batman, and one that just, the tragedy of Batman hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, you have that great shot because, he sees the shining, like, amulet or whatever in the back of the cave and goes up there to get it because Andrea has survived and has left and they're both alone. And I love that shot of Bruce, like, way in the background and Alfred, like, more up in the front of the shot, like, watching. And, like, that's one of those, like, Citizen Kane-esque images of, like, how exaggerated the distances between the two characters to accentuate the loneliness. It's, like, the fucking stupidly massive boardroom in Citizen Kane that is, like, that must be, like, 200 feet long or some shit.
Well, and one of this movie exploits it all over the place because deep focus is a difficult thing to achieve in film because you have to use actual lenses and lighting and shit. But in animation, draw whatever field of depth you want. And this movie and the series, to a lesser degree, because it doesn't have as much time or money, loves to do deep focus. And this movie does it so well. Yeah,
it's just like, that is one of those shots where like is burned in my memory of like, you are a sad, lonely motherfucker, Bruce Wayne. Like, and one of the things that it accentuates is like, and you're like that because you fucking chosen it, because Alfred is right there, you selfish prick. Right? It's like Alfred And I think it's like, again, it's something the movie never puts a fine point on, but it is always there. That it's like Alfred is there for you, but Bruce never allows himself to be open in that way with him, right? Yeah. It's like you always have this human connection. It's maybe like the one thing that does prevent him from going all the way that Andrea did. But he also never embraces his relationship with Alfred, like as a father.
Yeah. Alfred is going to be there for him no matter what. But Alfred is also there at any point. If Batman says, I want to get out of this, Alfred will move heaven and earth to make it happen.
Yeah, as soon as Batman/Bruce says, like, you know what, I'm going to get out of this, it's fucking, like, it should be cut back to Alfred, and he's in with, like, a Hawaiian shirt and shorts on and a fucking little, like, you know, drink with an umbrella, and it's like, let's go to Hawaii, motherfucker. Like, thank God, holy shit. You have no idea how dark and bleak and depressing it has been with you for, like, 30 fucking years, Master Wayne. Like, let's have a goddamn vacation for once.
That actually sounds like a great idea for a Batman story. Make that movie, DC. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Batman goes to Hawaii. He stays in the cowl, though, because the image of him on the beach is too funny.
Yes. But it's just the cowl. He doesn't have a shirt on because he's sunbathing.
Oh my God, I want that. Okay. One other scene we forgot to talk about, though, on that same vein is one of the other best scenes in the movie.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Is when Andrea leaves him and gives back the ring and all of that, and then you have Batman in the cave, and Alfred comes and brings him the cowl, and we don't see him, it's all in silhouette, and then he turns around and, like, Alfred sees the silhouette and is shocked, and you get the swell of Shirley Walker's amazing music that we're going to talk about in a second, and it is the birth of Batman, and it is symbolically the death of Bruce Wayne, because he puts that on and he's never really going to take it off. And good God, that is an amazing moment.
Yeah, it's an incredible scene. Like, just the way it's shot and edited, and the use of shadow there to just, like, wash all the detail out of Batman, pure silhouette, putting the mask on and getting the fucking, like, what is for him the first time you have the, I don't know how it's supposed to work, like, logically in the real world, but his, like, weird white eyes that, like,
it's like Spider-Man's eyes.
It's like Spider-Man's eyes that's just sort of, like, glower. And he walks past Alfred, and Alfred just looks at him and says, "Oh God." And it is like, you know, the birth of Frankenstein or something, or Frankenstein's monster, right? It is this, like, there's no way I feel like to watch that scene and come away from that being like he became Batman. It's like, oh fuck, he became Batman.
Well, because Batman's idea is, I want to strike fear into the criminals, but the first person he strikes fear into is Alfred.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about this movie. Like, if you're striking fear, you're striking fear. Like, and fear doesn't solve things.
Yeah.
Fear doesn't make anyone feel better.
But it all it does is let you punch criminals better.
Yeah.
Like, it creates an opening for you to punch someone in the fucking face. Like, that's what it does for you.
Exactly. And there's just that moment I feel such pathos for Alfred in it too, because he's also being terrorized by this.
Yeah.
You know? Oh man, it's a great moment. Speaking of, Shirley Walker.
Yeah.
So that name, I think, to anyone who's watched these shows is famous. She did this. She also did the Superman score, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So she did both of those shows. She was an orchestrator on the Tim Burton movies. So she worked with Danny Elfman on those scores. And she's an old school Hollywood composer. My brother right now is in school getting his master's degree for music composition. And they studied her work a couple of weeks ago for I forget what movie they were doing, but they were studying her work. And she's known as just a kind of a low-key legend, just in the sense of, like, I don't think she's a household name like John Williams, but I think anyone who composes respects her work a lot.
Right, yeah.
And certainly, if you have to point like the three most important things that made the animated series work, it would probably be the overall, like, storytelling tone, the animation, and Shirley fucking Walker. Because it brings this cinematic quality of music to the show. And I think that is one of the biggest things that, like, sold that show to its audience when it came out, is the music alone. Even if the animation were crap, and it's not, but even if it were, the music gives you a sense that you are watching something bigger than just, you know, Friday afternoon television syndicated on Fox. You are watching something, like, special and big, and she got to go even bigger for the movie, which notably does not use the Danny Elfman theme. It uses the other half of the Batman theme that she added for the TV show, but then adds on top of it in this big choir that does all of this stuff. And you can really feel the music just fully comes into its own in this movie, because it just claims itself. It doesn't use it's inspired by what Elfman did, but it is fully its own thing now, and it is an amazing score.
Yeah, it is my favorite Batman theme. Is the because it's the bum 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 bum. That part of it that is like broadly in the same style as the Danny Elfman theme, but it has this like melancholic, tragic feel to it that you like. Whenever that comes on, it's basically Batman's hero theme in the show. But whenever it comes on, it is both. It feels heroic and swelling, and also tragic at the same time.
Yeah.
And it captures that mood of the character, and then like getting that with like this organ and fucking choir accompaniment in this movie is just like, oh my god! And I had forgotten that's like how the movie starts, is with that like flyover, this like kind of old 3D CG-esque like version of Gotham City with that choir version.
It's a stunning opening.
Yeah, it's so good. It's just like basking in that fucking theme, which is so haunting.
I really love the opening titles to the original 89 Batman. I love that it's like this, you're going through this shape, you don't know what it is, and then you come out and it's the Batman logo and you have the Danny Elfman theme. It's great. This is even better.
Yeah.
And it's the music. I also think like it's old CGI, but it looks good because it's very clearly like old CGI they've like kind of drawn over.
Yes, yeah.
And so it is very much in the style of the show and the movie. And it's just when the title comes up, like again, I felt like I was watching it in a theatrical space last night because my brother has this big OLED TV and we had the lights off, and it just that title comes up over the city and the choir starts and it's like, oh, we are in a movie.
Yeah.
You know, it is such a great feeling. I can only imagine if you were like a fan of the show back in '93 and you got to go see it in the theater, how cool that must have been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fuck, it rocks.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, Shirley Walker, A+. Great music. I agree. I think it's the best Batman theme. And Batman almost always has good music.
Yeah.
We had Danny Elfman, we've got Shirley Walker, we've got Hans Zimmer coming up. Michael Giacchino is doing the new movie, and I'm excited to hear what he comes up with. Batman has not lacked for good music. Mm-hmm. And you know, now with the Joel Schumacher movies, we're going to get to hear the 90s pop soundtracks.
Yay!
But what else do we want to say about Mask of the Phantasm? Just again, I want to underline how good the animation is. I mean, and it's always hard to know how you're going to talk about this with animation when you say shot choice because it's a little ambiguous.
Yeah.
But the storyboarding of the movie, the composition of frames, the choice of where to deploy shadows, the way they do depth in the image. It is a masterful, masterful piece of animation. This is one of those movies where if you want to learn animation, either from like a scholarly analytical side or you want to go do animation, this would be on the short list of movies I would put on there of like understanding what animation can do, especially because there is no other animated movie I know of that employs darkness and shadows like this film.
Oh yeah, no, it is, and it's that thing of where I think one of the things I love about it is that it is taking these like really powerful visual and aesthetic inspirations from like what are some of my favorite movies of those like 40s era film noir films, while also not being restricted by them, right? It's taking the proper aesthetic influence while also embracing that it's animation and able to do some of these shots in ways that in live action either would be like stupidly hard to actually compose or impossible because it's not real.
Yeah.
And so like being able to use some of the same like shot composition and like quote unquote camera placement and stuff like that for like weird angles and everything by being inspired by those films while also not trying to slavishly replicate live action, which I think is a trap that a lot of American animation sometimes can fall into.
Yes.
And if it's trying to avoid being too cartoonish and it wants to be a little bit more realistic looking, sometimes it's like, well, then now you're just not even using the potential of what you could do with animation to do whatever shot you want at any point because it's all fake, it's not real.
Oh, exactly. You know, I think the legacy of German expressionism should not be forgotten here either. There's a whole lot of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in Batman the Animated Series. Because if you don't know, one of the things that the German expressionist films, most famously Caligari, but you get this in Nosferatu, you get this in some of these other movies, is by expressionism it means like literally the like things in the character's head and the feeling of the film is coming out into the image. So you get in Caligari, you have painted shadows everywhere instead of trying to light the shadows because you want it to be as precise as possible. Tim Burton fucking loves that, takes that for some of his stuff. But I think the real legacy of German expressionism in terms of the possibility is in animation.
Yeah.
Because animation is where you can paint shadows a lot more effectively than you can on a fucking film set.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the German expressionist idea of, like, painting shadows and doing what they do with makeup and all of that, I'm not sure it even works in, like, modern color film because it's so hard to...
Yeah, it's like Yes, no, with like higher resolution and like the one, like audience expectations, and then two, like the way that images look with film these days is like it would just look silly, I think.
But in an animated series, you can go whole hog on it, and they totally do, because those just big painted shadows, you get Batman's silhouette. The show does it too. I've always, I think I've said this before on the podcast, that I think the theme song to Batman the Animated Series is 90 seconds, and it is also one of the best Batman movies because every shot is like so perfectly chosen, and it also employs shadows very beautifully. And this is one thing, even like I don't think even anime does this much. Anime tends to be pretty high lit, like high key lighting, pretty evenly lit, lots of color. There's, not to my knowledge, a like big subgenre of like dark shadowy anime.
Not particularly, no.
So Batman is still unique in like the world of animation for doing this.
No, absolutely, yeah. And this is like the because it is the movie, it is like the best expression of that.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. All right. Anything else to say about Mask of the Phantasm before we call it a day? I am so glad we finally got to do a podcast on this movie. We've been wanting to do a full Mask of the Phantasm podcast for, this is year 10, for 10 years.
For 10 years, yeah. It feels like it's that thing where it's like, I couldn't tell if we've never done a podcast on it or if we've done it like 5 times. It's like, it feels like we've talked about it so much, but just more in a like, it is just a, anytime you talk about Batman, we're going to end up talking about Mask of the Phantasm. We've talked about it, I feel like, in every Batman podcast so far. Anyways, and we will continue to do so.
Yeah. I think this is the best one we've watched so far.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see if anything, I would say this, Dark Knight, and Batman Returns. And then Batman 66 is so its own thing. I love it.
It's hard to
compare.
Rate with other ones.
But this movie, man, if you somehow have gotten through the end of this and never seen it, just, I cannot recommend it highly enough. Hopefully, I think this will also be on HBO Max, hopefully, with the series, so people can just go see it easily.
Yeah.
Because it is so great. And it is kind of sad to me that we've never gotten a DC animated movie of this quality again. Like, Under the Red Hood is great. It is not obviously on this level of animation. And most of what they've done has been direct to video. And I would love something like this again on like this level of quality, because some people might ask, well, if you're doing all the theatrical movies, Killing Joke had that 2-night premiere, blah, 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 in theaters. This is where I saw Killing Joke. We're not talking about Killing Joke because, yes, it played in theaters for 2 nights. It is very much a direct-to-video movie because it is the cheapest-looking shit I've ever fucking seen. It is some of the worst animation I've ever looked at with my eyeballs. I wanted to stab them out. And, like, I do kind of resent to a certain degree that, like, that's where some, not all Batman animation, because the DC animated universe goes up and down quite a bit. But, Mask of the Phantasm leaves such a large shadow. You wish there was more like it, and there isn't quite.
Yeah. Have you ever watched Batman Beyond Return of the Joker?
That's a good point. I have not seen that.
I know that we said we're only going to do theatrical movies. I'm going to offer something up here, Jonathan.
Okay.
Maybe we should watch Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. You don't need to have watched Batman Beyond to watch and enjoy that movie.
Because I was going to ask. I've always wanted to. I've never watched much Batman Beyond.
All you need to know about Batman Beyond is that there's a new Batman in the future that pairs up with old Batman, Bruce Wayne, and he's crotchety, and new Batman is like a young, hip kid. Teen.
Okay. Well, that's okay, because you say that, and I hadn't even thought of it, because it is a direct-to-video, but I know that one has a reputation as being more than that.
It's very good. It's very good. And one reason why I'm saying that is when I got the animated series for Christmas, I also got that movie on Blu-ray, because I'm like, I wanted to rewatch that one as well.
Okay. Well, then why don't we'll call an audible here.
Yes.
That will be part 7. This is part 4. We still have to do Forever and Batman and Robin, and then Batman Beyond would be between that and Batman Begins.
Yes.
So we'll do it there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
All right.
Because there's definitely... Because I feel like because I did have this thought the other day when I got that movie. I was like, wait, I don't know if Jonathan's watched this because I knew you hadn't watched Batman Beyond. And I feel like with how much you like Mark Hamill's Joker, you kind of have to watch fucking Return of the Joker.
So all the stuff I was just saying about Mask of the Phantasm, that's the movie I should have been looking for all this time.
Yes, it's not as good as Mask of the Phantasm, and it's like I don't want to like put your expectations that high, but it is. I mean, if you're rating it with the other DC animated movies, like Under the Red Hood, it is better than any of those. Okay. For sure.
Should we also add Under the Red Hood in here at some point?
We might as well. We've talked about it so much. Yeah.
We should. So we will carve out exceptions for those two on home video, and I will get an updated schedule out, and this will go from a 10-parter to a 12-parter. But hey, the Robert Pattinson movie isn't coming out for a long-ass time.
That's another reason why to do it is, like, I feel like the scope of this project it was originally designed to go up to that movie. Who knows when that movie is actually going to come out? So there's a lot of like wiggle room Batman movies we can dig into if we really want to.
Yeah, we'll do those two, because I think I can't think of off the top of my head any other home video ones. I think maybe when we do Batman and Robin, we should also just briefly talk about Sub-Zero.
Sure, yeah.
Because that one...
I got it, so I didn't watch the end.
Because that one was technically a tie-in. They actually delayed it for a year because Batman and Robin was so bad. Yeah. But it was meant to be like, hey, you guys... Because Batman and Robin was heavily inspired by the Mr. Freeze episode of the animated series, which, if you've never seen it, is the best episode, Heart of Ice. I mean,
yes,
it's
and
iconic.
it is like the thing that created Mr. Freeze basically as a character in the modern consciousness.
Yeah, go watch Mr. Freeze in the 66 series to see what he was before that. It's very different.
Yeah.
But yes, so we'll probably mention that there. But in terms of home video stuff, let's just say those are the two that are worthy of discussion. There are other decent Batman movies, but not on that level.
No, so. Yeah. In Return of the Joker, if like, you know, we're talking about so much about Mask of the Phantasm, and it's like it is very consciously like connected to this movie in different ways.
I am so excited.
Yeah.